word to the wise. We are an explicit podcast tackling content with adult themes as well as entering spoiler territory if you aren't caught up with us. We are going to be spoiling the shit out of the entirety of the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. Because we done with Era 1.
Hey there, this is Cross.
And I'm PJ.
And we are Words and Whiskey, a podcast for veteran and novice readers alike. We tackle fiction novels and love to talk about what we're drinking. You should think of us as your intoxicating weekly book club.
What up? It's PJ. I'm fucking with the format.
What up? I'm here. I'm doing it. We have a doorstopper of an episode today, so I'm gonna waste no time in getting us to talk about our drinks. So today is our wrap up discussing The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, and we are going to be talking about the entire fucking book and probably some things that are, era wide. There might be some questions that pertain and some answers. We're going to save some of our thoughts and questions and kind of musings for our final wrap up episode that we're having on Sunday. But for the most part, We'll be sticking to that formula. We may have some stuff, some like side things about Elantris. We probably won't talk about it too much. If anything, we'll try to segment that out so that you know to hit skip. But yeah, cool. So before we get too far in, let's start with what we're drinking today. PJ, what are you having?
A lot, apparently, based on these notes and how many predictions I got wrong this time around. But the cocktail that I made, I wanted to do something sort of themed out and had a little bit of fun with it. So I'm calling this Of Ruin entirely. So Of Ruin, 2 ounces of mezcal, 1 ounce of lime juice, 1 ounce of hot honey syrup, 6 drops of Bitterman's chocolate bitters, all of that shaken, served over ice in a smoked double rocks glass, garnished with a lime wedge and rosemary sprig, which I torched. So,
how's it taste?
Fucking delicious. It tastes really good. Like essentially a smoky, spicy margarita is what it tastes like.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. You can kind of see that from those ingredients.
I had forgotten, so I looked at the photo and I was like, whoa, just from a distance, I didn't really look up at it close. And I was like, whoa, it's catching some like weird light and reflecting off the wall. And then I clicked into it and I was like, oh no, that's the smoky sprig. And he like got the smoke when it was like going.
Yep.
So it looked great. Looks really great.
It's really,
sounds
really
like it tastes really great too.
Mm-hmm. I'm excited about it.
Nice.
Yeah. Crossland, do you have a book? Oh, I'm following that up, but
yeah. What's your back half beer?
I went to the liquor store and wanted to try something new. I've had Anti-Hero by Revolution Brewing Company years and years and years ago, but they had a Hero mix pack. So it's a mixed 12 pack with 4 different beers, including Anti-Hero, but one of them is Valkyrie Hero, which is a hazy rye IPA. So excited to give that a shot because I don't think I've ever had a rye, like a hazy rye. I love rye IPAs. Or rye PAs, as they're sometimes called. But that flavor doesn't really mesh super well with the really citrusy hops that you expect in a hazy. So, yeah, looking forward to it. But
have you popped it to try it yet?
I just did. Let's see. I didn't pour this into anything, so I don't know what it actually looks like. But if you gave me that and told me it was a like standard West Coast style or American IPA with rye, I'd totally believe you. It doesn't really have the sort of hazy IPA characteristics that you look for with like the more full body and the, I don't know, low bitterness. Like it's essentially just an IPA, and I don't know why they're calling it hazy. So, but I guess hazy doesn't necessarily mean New England, does it?
It's true. Right.
Yep.
It's just that we equate those things.
Yeah. it feels shady to market it that way, if that's indeed the case of what's going on. But following that, I've got Anti-Hero, because I know I'm going to be taking a lot of sips, a lot of drinks for my predictions. So I grabbed 2 backup beers. I'm having yours. I'm having your back half beer because you have a lot to talk about right now, my friend.
I do. So I made a trio of Almantic shots, and in all honesty, me talking about it isn't going to perfectly do it justice. So make sure to go look at our Instagram and go double check our website to check out the drinks so you can actually see the photos, because they're really pretty.
They are really, really pretty. Also, I'm sorry. I'm going to update all of my entries. I'm going to put them in. It's been a bit since I've added any to the website, but I will do that.
All good. But I've got 4 to enter because I made 3 shots and a cocktail, and they're all new shit. Like, these don't exist anywhere else, and they're all tasty in their own right. So I'm very excited to kind of talk about this. Okay, so the first one that I have is called, we decided to name these in the Devil's Cut. So if you want to listen to that, you can hear exactly why they're named what they're named. But the first one is kind of a purple. And so it kind of made us think iron, like the lines that burst out of you when you burn iron. So we're calling it Lurch. What it is it is 1 ounce of End of Days Luna Bloom Gin, which is their new kind of butterfly pea flower. I think that's what it's called, butterfly pea flower gin. So it's typically got a blue hint, but when you hit it with different citrus levels, it changes the color. Very similar to like Empress Gin, I think, is the other brand that's kind of doing a similar thing at the moment. But I think that this tastes better. So anyway, getting back to it, 1 ounce End of Days Luna Bloom Gin, 1/4 ounce of grapefruit juice, an absinthe rinse in your little shot glass, and a 1/4 ounce of maraschino cherry liqueur. It is fucking delicious. Some of that's on the gin, some of that's on the way that the grapefruit pairs with the gin so well, and just that little hint in that absinthe rinse inside of these little, they're like 2.5 ounces actually, but so inside of these little shot glasses, or 2 ounces, a little bit under 2 ounces when I measured it. So that's for a shot, basically, not to fill one of these. But this is how I made them, do as you will. These aren't necessarily shot to size. Adjust them so that they are properly measured for shots and shot glasses. So, honestly, these probably make 2 a piece.
Yeah. So what you have there is 1.5 ounces. The next one you have is 2 ounces. And then the one after that is almost 3 ounces, 2.75 ounces. So these are ratios, not necessarily exactly what you're drinking, right?
Yes, exactly. These are definitely ratios. So that's Lurch. Lurch is a flowery grapefruit with like this kick almost of like herbaceous umami. What's crazy is none of that is sweet. There's no simple syrup in this at all, and it is still sweet because of that grapefruit. That grapefruit is it gets that citrus note in there, but it's also sweet, and it pairs really well with that maraschino and the bloom gin. So it's
and
super
I think
good.
There's some sweetness to that maraschino.
Yes, yeah. Maraschino is definitely a little sweet. So yeah. Mm-hmm. All that I mean by that is that there's no syrup sweetness, right? So you're not like playing to sweetness by adding a syrup there. Okay, that's our iron shot. Urteau's Savior, which named after Spook, of course, is a little tin shot of Almantic Bliss. This one is going to be 1.5 ounces of mezcal, a 1/2 ounce of lime, a 1/4 ounce of simple syrup, and about 1/10 of an ounce of green chartreuse, just a little bit, just enough to give it that little hint of chartreuse to kind of cut through everything, give it a little herbaceous. This one's probably the most simple. I mean, I kind of wanted something that was a little bit more accessible for people so that they could have like a good mezcal shot. For the most part, this is like you could almost equate this to like a big shift on a margarita recipe, but trading out the triple sec for chartreuse, of which you need a lot less of to get, flavor out of. So I really like this one. I think it's great. I think Spook would really like it, and he would drink a lot of them while burning pewter now to make sure that he is a drug.
This is something that I think you could do an entire cocktail with this by taking all of those ingredients and adding them to black tea.
That could actually work really well. That would like pair herbaceously and be like almost a
I think you'd probably take out the lime, maybe.
Yeah, probably. Try without. Yeah, I like that. I almost put my hot honey syrup that I have, so I almost did my Calabrian pepper honey in this instead of the simple, but I decided just to stick with the simple because I was like, I don't know if spice makes sense in there, and I'm glad I didn't because I actually prefer it this way. Next up, the last of the Allomantic shots is Claudin's Cure-All, which is a copper shot here. All of these, by the way, have metal flakes in them inside the photo, so they have a nice swirl, and they look kind of like they're the little vials that you'd see a Mistborn or Allomancer rip out of their pocket.
Edible glitter, right?
Yeah, yep, exactly. It's the edible food glitter meant for this.
That got really, really weirdly popular within the brewing industry for a hot minute there. Like they were doing like weird unicorn sours that were like dosed with this glitter. It was really weird. Anyway, sorry.
I mean, it looks really cool when it's moving, and I totally get it. It's definitely a gimmick, but it's an especially great gimmick for this book because it fits perfectly. It looks great, shaking around and seeing it. You can kind of imagine, you get that feel like you're holding that power just by even like staring at it and thinking about it a little bit. Just gives you that memory. But Claudin's Cure-All, which is our copper drink here, is 1 ounce tequila, a ½ ounce Campari, 1/4 ounce simple, mint muddled, and 1 ounce of grapefruit. And it is so fucking good. This is the one that I was like, this is the one that I'm going to be drinking first, actually, is Claudin's Cure-All, because it is so tasty. You wouldn't expect that like mint, Campari, grapefruit to work together as well as it does, but it do. It do.
Mm-hmm.
It do be tasty.
It do be tasty. That's the one you took. Mm-hmm. You took a shot of that for our pre-recording shot.
Yeah, and I'm drinking more, man.
Every episode in the Devil's Cut.
Once again, it's no longer Dry July.
Also, no longer Dry July. Yeah. So now we have a
cocktails
and a traffic jam of predictions to sort through.
Payoff.
Yep.
Okay, final drink. Folks at home, appreciate your patience getting through this with me here. This drink is of ruin, so of course I had to make of preservation. Two sides of the same coin here, as it were, or different sides of the same coin, I should say. So what we have: 2 ounces of mezcal, 1 ounce maraschino liqueur, a splash of simple syrup, and 1.5 ounces of grapefruit shaken, and it's awesome. It's cool that we went accidentally together on mezcal to pair up in this way, and went with different citruses and then also different supporting flavors. So I think that that's really fun that we ended up kind of doing similar things without really planning it.
Yeah. I really like that we were able to name it as we were, because I went into it thinking like, all right, mezcal, we've got the smoky notes. I'm going to lean into it as hard as I can and do something ruin based. My other thought was calling it like Ash Mount. The Ash Mounts or something like that.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that we both did something similar and we're able to name it as such. But
yeah, I really dug that too. I really think that it's neat. I think if I would have prepped and if we would have, talked a little bit, I probably would have made this with tequila. Just that way we would have had like the opposition there too, where you've got like the smoky and then you've got the, the opposite side of that kind of sweeter, drier flavor. But all told, very pleased with how all of these came out. So PJ, that's our whole drink section. Before we talk about the chapters, well, we're going to get sloshed. So let's just we're just going to put that on the table real quick. This is going to be an episode for sure. Going to be in a sight and time. We're going to hold it together as long as we can. But before we get into the predictions, I want to ask, while we still have our hats on, our britches, our pants up, and everything going the right way. I don't know why I said that. What were your general feelings about this book? Kind of how'd you feel about the book on the whole? How'd you feel about the series now that we're kind of done and over with it? What's sticking with you, and what are your thoughts?
So I have a hard time not saying that this is my favorite book because of all of the rule payoffs that I've been like straining over for the last 3 books. But that said, I feel like story-wise, it's maybe one of the weakest of the trilogy. Like we've gone into detail about that, especially towards the end, the last couple sections. It really kind of it feels rushed as far as like motivation payoffs go to a certain extent. But goddamn, those rules are sucking me in. I love them. Just getting the full breakdown and more full understanding of the magic system that we've been living and breathing for the last several months, with an intentional sort of bit of mystery to it, but understanding the entire time that there's an underlying rule set that was being followed. I felt like that payoff was genius and masterfully done. So yeah, those are kind of my general thoughts on it. Depending on what perspective I'm looking at, it's either my most favorite or least favorite
of the trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really fair analysis, though, because it does feel like in some ways the weakest from a writing standpoint in certain sections. And then at the same time, it feels like Brandon's grown up and matured in writing, which is why I think the whole thing feels like the most inconsistent entry, if that makes sense. It lifts a lot with a ton of exposition. This book is mostly exposition, which leaves the plot kind of dangling through the whole thing and really kind of leaves our characters out to dry a little bit more than, I'd prefer. And by our characters, I don't mean all of our characters. We have a lot of characters that are given the time to shine in this book, of which I really appreciate. I really like how this book gives us a spook arc and like really pays it off. That's something that I feel like is fairly common in other pieces of media, is to go like, well, I really like the series. I would like pay money to have like a book that was this character, or like, a novella that was this character. And inside of this novel, we basically get a little spook novella, which is cool, which I think is great. And then we also, we fully pay off Sazed, of whom, has been a character up until this point. So that also feels great.
It's true. Yeah. I agree with you there. I feel like there's still more to learn about Sazed, but that's just based on like the reveals that we get in the epilogue through the logbook and through conversation with Spook.
That's fair. And there's still some things to learn. I mean, obviously the series on the whole isn't done, even as far as the new book that's coming out isn't going to end the series. Brandon, as early as earlier this week, was saying that it's going to take him about, at this point, to get through all of the things. It's like he's basically got a 20-year plan. And that's crazy to think about from, a number of perspectives. So
yeah. But how old is Brandon Sanderson at this point?
40 something.
Oh, for some reason I thought he was in like his mid 50s.
No. I want to say, okay, he's 46 now.
So he'll be pushing 70 realistically by the time he gets through this whole thing.
I mean, 66. It's
assuming
like
he follows that plan exactly.
He's making assumptions that he's not going to follow the plan as he wants, because he thinks he can get it done in 15.
Okay.
He's basically giving himself a 5-year buffer. So, gotcha. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. Like, you're saying, what are the chances that he's going to do that? I think Brandon Sanderson, along with Stephen King, they're like the two most consistent writers that exist. They pump out, King in his prime was doing 4 books a year. Sanderson's doing like 2.5, but just going. So
yeah. Kill it.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. 2.5, 3. And some of those are crazy length. So it's also tough to even go like compare, 3 to 4 to 2 to 3. It's like some of these are like 400,000 word chunkers. So, like next year we're reading 4 books that he wrote in a year and a half, like in addition to the other book that he wrote over the course of the last couple of years, which we're reading, in a couple of months. So it's like he wrote 5 books in the span of 2 years.
We're
books.
It's almost like we're covering the books at the same rate as he writes them.
There genuinely there was someone of whom was in one of the Discords kind of sending messages when I was talking about kind of scheduling and the way that we're planning things, and this was before kind of the Jade City Greenbone Saga turnoff that we're going to take, and they were like, well, you could just follow Brandon's writing forever. And I'm like, Yeah, we could. I personally think that there are other shows that do that explicitly, and that's great. We like to kind of think of ourselves as a breadth and try a bunch of things, and we are going to do the entirety of the published Cosmere up until Stormlight 5, and then probably take a break from it for a while and go other directions and come back whenever it suits us in a short pour or whatever. But that's what I want to do.
For that reason, I really appreciate that we've made the decision to do Greenbone and to kind of branch out a little bit, because it's kind of daunting, the amount of material that feeds into this, and I want to cover all of it. I really do at this point. It's just, that is a task. So being able to break it up at the very least will be good, I think.
I definitely agree. I think that it is, not only is it going to be kind of a task to get through, but I also don't want to make it feel like a task, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want to make it feel like it's kind of, I don't want to turn the podcast accidentally into coloring by numbers, which can be very easy, I think, if you cover the same person's writing for so long, which is another reason that I'm very excited that we're going to break it up. We get some tonal shifts, we get some comparisons, and you have more under your belt so that you can draw more comparisons and think of different things and different approaches and approach stories differently. So
I'm a reader now, Crossland.
I know. You've read so many books this year.
Like 4.
Like 4 whole books. 5, right? Warehouse. You read Paradox too, didn't you?
Yeah.
Warehouse.
Yep.
Paradox.
Paradox.
Mistborn. So that puts us at 5. Elantris. 6. By the end of the year, you're going to hit 10.
When did we finish Dark Age?
Oh, that was November of last year.
Okay. So Dark Age.
Yeah. I want to count calendar year. I want to take into consideration your calendar year. Yeah. So far, you're at 6. I think by the end of the year, you'll be at 11 or 12
for the show.
On.
But now I'm excited to have. Now I actually am getting excited about reading things on my own, which is never once happened before in my life until starting this show. So
yeah.
You did it, Crossland.
Mission accomplished, which is very cool. So, all of that to say, I do want to bring something up, and I think it'll be a question that we can talk about more. But there is some fresh news that we should just address since we're here. It seems very likely that there is going to be an adaptation of Mistborn in the near future. Sanderson, on, I think it was 2 days ago from the time that we're recording this, so I think it was August 3rd or 4th or something like that, basically confirmed that there will be, this time next year, he should be in production on something, and he can't announce what project, he can't announce with whom or anything like that, but he's hit a point where he's gone from just options to them approaching him with a full production team saying we're ready to go. And now there's kind of an internal question of, they have the budget, they have the scripts are starting, they have a lot of things that are actually in place. They have casting kind of nailed down for wants, wishes, desires. So now it's just a matter of sorting out the money.
Counting it all.
So yeah, counting it all for Brandon. Yeah. So that's been taking up a lot of his time. So that's a part of the reason, as we discussed previously, that Stormlight 5 got pushed to 2024, which honestly, pretty convenient for us. Not convenient for fans on the whole, but great for covering what we're covering. So,
right.
Yeah. Okay, I guess I didn't really say my general thoughts. I've been baking something that I think I've mentioned, or I haven't mentioned explicitly, but there's been something kind of clawing at the back of my mind for a bit as we've been covering the series. And I think that it's actually a lot more hopeful than it might sound when I say this. I think the Era 1 Mistborn trilogy is my least favorite Cosmere entry. I think on the whole, it's, and that's not to say that it's bad by any means. That's not kind of what I'm getting at here. But I think that the magic system is incredibly unique. I think that sometimes the characters are kind of inconsistent a little bit throughout. In the books themselves, they're consistent. Book to book, they're not necessarily consistent. And the writing book to book also isn't consistent, which is interesting and a little bit. it's incongruous in a way that I didn't love in this pass. And I think that's all the negative I really have. I still really enjoyed the series again on the way through, and I think I agree with you. Hero of Ages is my least favorite of the books. When we started, I was pretty sure that Mistborn was my least favorite. I love the way that Hero of Ages has these like highlights. It has the highest highs. For me, it also has the lowest lows and just kind of a lot more plotting points that I don't think really matter in the long run, or that, you know, kind of feel like wasted page, not wasted pages, but not impactful pages in the way that others do. And I know it's kind of been an unpopular opinion. I know that a lot of people don't like The Well of Ascension. I strictly think The Well of Ascension is the best book in the series in Era 1. But like I said, highest highs, lowest lows was kind of my takeaway from Heroes.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Yeah. But it makes me very excited to cover Era 2, for instance, of which we're going to go into, you know, pretty soon, and excited to eventually get to Stormlight and to cover Warbreaker, you know, in a couple of months as well on a short pour, and kind of work through those, because I think truly it's only uphill from here.
All right. That makes me excited, because I'm happy with where we're at right now. True.
Yeah, I get that. I had an okay time.
I think you mentioned something fair to me that I think will probably ring true, knowing like how this goes. First pass is a really, really like crazy wild ride. Second pass, you pick up a ton of stuff that you didn't pick up on the first time because you were missing context and you were missing information. But your third time through, which is what you were doing, all the magic's gone. Like all the frosting's off the cake, you know? Like
yeah, it was like the dry cake had been exposed to air for too long, and it felt like it had just been left out too long. I mean, and part of that's because of the freshness of how many times I went over it, but I think like I hadn't had the ability to grow fond of it because I hadn't been far enough away from it for long enough, or, you know, like want to return or have a desire to immediately. So I think that impacts it. But I do also, I think, especially in the Hero of Ages, a lot of my issues with Brandon's Wheel of Time books came back to me this time around when I was like done looking at the glowy, flashy. And I think that's kind of what stuck with me and why I've kind of came to this conclusion. That said, like I said, I like the books. I like these a lot more than I like his Wheel of Time books, of which I've mentioned. I don't know that I've mentioned it overtly on the show so many times. I've mentioned it many a time in private conversations and things like that. I did not read Brandon Sanderson because of his Wheel of Time books. I did not like them. I still, to this day, I'm considering a reread on my own to see if I have changed. But yeah, so we'll see. I'm willing. Adult Crossland is willing to give them another try, but yeah.
So it's probably safe to say we won't cover Wheel of Time.
No, it's too long. It's straight up. For like our format. I mean, maybe, but I doubt it. I would.
Would you recommend I watch the Amazon show or not?
Oh, I love the show. Yeah.
Okay.
I like it. I like it quite a bit. I think that it is. What's funny is that people who haven't read the books like it a lot more than people who have. And I really like it. I think that's because people are dumb. I think that's why.
Okay.
Show's great writing, show's great action. It had a shoddy CGI sequence, unfortunately, because of COVID, unable to be able to do live things. And they unfortunately had an actor leave, which forced them to diverge the story in a fairly interesting way.
Weird.
In the middle of filming. Yeah. So they had to like really kind of... There's a moment that happens later in the story that they basically had to kind of shoehorn in now to make it kind of make sense. They're also turning, a 14, 15 book, depending on if you count the prequel series, into 8 series of TV. 8 seasons of TV is the plan. So they have to cut some things out and also condense some things. So they really condense the first. Their plan is to basically get through book 3 with season 2, and then the show or the books really open up after the first 3 books. The first 3 books are kind of like Robert Jordan's riff on Lord of the Rings. If that makes sense.
Okay. Cool. Well,
not Ring in the Fire, but it's fine. It's like a horn.
I'll add it to the pile of shit that I have to watch, including Better Call Saul and
Wheel of Time's only 8 episodes.
What's the other thing that I hadn't finished yet?
Love, Death, Robots.
Mr. Robot.
Mr. Robot.
But you and I were talking about something like yesterday. I'm like halfway through Better Call Saul, and I'm like halfway through The Boys.
Oh, yes. Right.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So add it to the pile.
Yep.
Keep adding it to the pile.
The never shortening pile. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It just continues to grow forever and ever until you pass away. I'm just kidding.
Do more podcasts and watch less stuff.
Do more podcasts, watch less stuff. Do more podcasts, watch less stuff. Do more podcasts. Have time to do nothing. Have nothing to podcast about. Take a break. Watch a bunch of shit. Do more podcasts. All right.
Should we talk about this book?
It is time to begin the predictions. With that, I'm actually going to swap out these shots. PJ, do you want to read the first one?
The first prediction was Vin and Kelsier also share a conversation around snapping and the implications therein. Kelsier explains that he snapped when Mare died. When do you think Vin snapped? And my answer to that...
I was going to say, this is our furthest back question. So this is all the way back in the first book. I think it's about a little bit over half the way through the first book.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that sounds about right.
When do you think Vin snapped? You said.
My answer was... I asked a clarifying question that didn't get answered. Does she ever mention using her luck with Reen? If not, I'm guessing it's when he leaves her. If so, I have no idea. I said that. That's a dumb answer because the answer is birth. Yep. So I'm drinking for that one.
Cheers. Drink number one. One prediction down. Next one. I'll read the whole thing here for you. Vin then has a very strange interaction while burning bronze, listening to the thrumming of metal, sounding like a distant drum until she actually does notice someone burning metals. There's an image in the mist forming, becoming more solid as it's encircled. And when it takes a step forward, Vin throws coins and jumps away. What could this be? You said. This, I think ties... I figured we'd just switch full.
Oh, sure.
Full bore.
Yeah.
You said, this, I think, ties not only to what Marsh says later, that the mists are coming during the day, but also what the Lord Ruler warned about, that he was actively doing something to keep the realm safe. Now that his influence is gone, things are going to start coming back. This, I think, is one of those things.
It's kind of true, but not like, that's not the reason. The well comes back after 1,000 years, and the Lord Ruler was just waiting that time out. He wasn't like keeping it at bay. So that's me.
Yeah, this Mist Spirit doesn't have anything specifically to do with the Lord Ruler being there or gone.
Right.
Next up.
Another detail here. They weren't able to find the Lord Ruler's cache, and they don't believe that the A-Team exists. And it seems to be what's drawing...
I write like half sentences for the record.
Yeah.
I guess I can read mine and you can read yours if you want to do that for the rest of this, because I'll just fill it in. Okay. We're flipping the format like we do right in the middle of an episode here. So another detail here. They weren't able to find the Lord Ruler's ATM cache and don't believe that it exists. And it seems to be what's drawing Straff to Elend beyond just the power of the central dominance, the power of that the ATM could provide.
You had trouble with that. I think that was a question that was like in context of like a series of other questions.
Yes.
So we plucked it straight out of the previous book. So my answer to that was, I still think the ATM was being used by the Lord Ruler. So my theory was that there was no cache of ATM because the Lord Ruler was using it in some way in order to maintain the power that he had. Like there was some hidden power within ATM if burned at a certain level. Maybe it's related to what he was doing to hold whatever at bay. Yeah, so that's my drink again. But
I actually think that you are secretly a lot closer here than you're giving yourself credit for, because he was ultimately burning it and doing it to keep Ruin at bay. Burning it, not so much, but whenever he was kind of shoveling away as much as he was, his economic system was meant to keep ATM scarce, even though it really wasn't a scarce metal.
So yes, but the core of what I was talking about was that there was no secret cache. It was scarce because he was making it scarce by using it all. as opposed to stockpiling.
Again, I would say that there is a secret cache because there was in the trust warrant. However, it's not really his cache necessarily.
Yes, that's how it actually is. My assumption was that he was taking all of it and consuming and using all of it. So there was no actual stash anywhere.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Totally understand the context of what you're trying to say. I just want to give you a little bit of credit because I think you were more on to some things than you were others. I did just say moron on accent.
You were moron.
you were moron one time earlier before. All right, next one here. All this death and destruction caused by the mist that leaves us with questions we've been pondering for a bit, but haven't really put anything kind of on as we thought about them. Do you have any suspicions of what's going on with the mist? Why do some live and some die?
Being inside seems to actually help, and they run out of food and starve to death.
So this was talking specifically about Sazed visiting the village and kind of the death and destruction that they had claimed that the mists had wrought on the town of Ska.
Yeah,
the murders that he had seen.
I mean, it's me, but what we don't have are the people that survived that. So we still don't quite know where they are, right? But that's just more speculation going forward. But yeah, wasn't them starving to death by avoiding the mist.
Yeah. I mean, a number did starve to death because they avoided the mists, right? But it was for a silly reason. Cool. All right, next up. Lots of speculation while studying the documents, which is strange for Vin, for sure. She's not usually one to kind of inquire into documentation. She spent some time speculating about Kelsier's real place in this whole mess while thinking about these documents. Do you think he potentially fucked everything up?
I honestly don't think Kelsier fucked everything up, unless the fuck up would be the idea to kill the Lord Ruler in the first place in this respect.
This is interesting.
Yeah, this one's not definitively answered at this time because we have to know what the actual plan was. If there was some sort of cosmic plan from Preservation that accounted for Vin and Kelsier taking down the Lord Ruler, or if it was a deviation in that, like, it depends on how much of a plan and how much they can actually influence as gods on this planet.
Well, I think that's the idea of, like, that's Rune's part of the plan, right? Was to use Vin to kill the Lord Ruler. So, like, that's...
But preservation. Why do I always say perseverance? I say it so often. Preservation had also selected her.
Yeah.
And I feel like Preservation selected her first.
Yes, right.
And then Ruin kind of started influencing, or is it the other way around? That Ruin...
No, Preservation selected first. Yeah.
That can't be the case. Because Ruin was waiting for somebody with that exact lineage. Insane Mother.
Yeah.
So Ruin picked first, right? And then Preservation noticed.
Preservation picked first, and then it also happened to work out that her mother was crazy, by the book's definition.
Okay. Now I have more to think about.
Personally, I think Kelsier fucked everything up. I also think Kelsier was manipulated to do so. That's kind of so there is one thing that we haven't technically covered in Era 1 yet, and that is the 11th Metal, which is a short story. Highly recommend reading it. It's great. It's easy. It's in Arcanum Unbounded. You have the audiobook. You also have the physical book, so you can check it out whenever you like. It's a prequel that covers Kelsier and his trainer Gemmel. And that's all I'll really say. It's pretty short. It's a 4,000-word short story. It's very, very short. It does give a little bit more context here, but it's not like... It's still, without that context, I think we can still pretty easily say that Kelsier was very clearly manipulated by the lie of the 11th Metal and believed that it was going to be some trick to kill, and it really wasn't. And so kind of set things into motion for Ruin so that Vin could kill the Lord Ruler, of whom would have picked up the power, not released him, and then continued his imprisonment for another 1,000 years.
Right. But does it fuck everything up if now we've got 4 or 5 years to annihilate Ruin?
What? I don't understand.
That's better than
4 or 5 years.
It's been however many years it's been since the Lord Ruler died. That's how long it took to obliterate Ruin instead of just keeping him in prison for another 1,000 years. Isn't that a better plan?
Yeah, but it's not Kelsier's plan. You know what I mean?
No,
like it's not.
The question is whether or not Kelsier fucked everything up, not whether or not he ruined the plan or destroyed, like subverted the plan. It's whether or not he fucked everything up, and I don't think he did in that respect.
So
it diverted the plan.
Preservation's plan by the end of Hero of Ages, as it's exposed to us, was for Vin to be the replacement, was for Vin to pick up the power and to become Preservation, to be a vessel for Preservation.
And just keep Ruin held at bay. The idea was to continue in imprisonment as opposed to just fucking get rid of him.
Well, yeah, because Preservation is a power of preserving the status quo, of keeping the status quo, right? So like Preservation's plan was to keep the status quo.
I guess what I'm arguing is that while Kelsier's actions destroyed, I want to say ruined Preservation's plan, I don't think that
the end result is better, but that's not okay. The end result is better, but it is a hiccup in the plan, and it is Kelsier's hiccup.
Sure. But is that fucking everything up as it's written here?
Yeah, fuck it. In context to the moment, I meant.
I know what you meant, but what you wrote is regards. Better. I'll drink for it.
All right.
Yes.
No. It's fair. It's fair. Okay, well, we're both drinking for it. We did put push on it. I do really like this one. This is the Urto Savior that I'm drinking right now. The amount of glitter that I put in this one, though. I got a weird texture on it.
Oh, that one. Urto Savior. Mezcal, lime, simple, green chartreuse. That's the one that I think would go with black tea, I think.
Yes.
I could also see it going really well with ginger beer.
Oh, yeah. That could work.
Even with the lime. You probably have to add
beer.
more lime, actually, for that.
Mm-hmm.
Do it like a mule.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Cool. No, that's good. Yeah, this would totally work mule style. Great call. It basically is a mule, sans the ginger beer. Slightly different ratio. Cool. So I want you to make a wild prediction here. Given what we know now, what do you make of the Hero of Ages, Well of Ascension, the deepness and the correlation between what we've seen? What is the deepness? And you said...
maybe a yin-yang style power structure, with the Hero of Ages being the good, the deepness being the bad, and the Well of Ascension being the place where their powers can be realized. That is not right, but it's kind of close.
It's fairly, like, you picked out the pieces, right? Which I think the story gives you the pieces and wants you to figure out how the puzzle sits together. All three of the things that you mentioned are actually on the same side, which is great from a hindsight perspective. Like, the Hero of Ages is the hero in theory, but the Hero of Ages is not what we thought it was. So really, that's kind of a ruined manipulation, I guess. The deepness is the mist, which is the power of preservation. The Wall of Ascension is the power of preservation in a coalesced form. But the reason that I'm going to give it to you is because you shocked not only me, but a lot of our listeners inside of our Discord when you went off about the yin-yang power structure. And specifically, you got a little bit more specific than the answer that you wrote here, and you started to think about like the way that the powers interact against each other and would be pushing. And you went a lot more nebulous. I also thought there was a second well. You did, and technically, like, you're fair. To be fair, like, it's a different coalescing of power. It's more fragmented because it's not all, coalescing into a well. It's a deep mine because preservation buried it there. But
Mm-hmm.
That's an assumption for the record that preservation buried it there. It just seems the most obvious answer. So cheers on that one.
Cheers.
Okay, next up. And then we arrive at the book that they've crafted, Unbound here. To quote, the most important thing that Sazed had ever written, and it's been damaged. Every single copy of that sentence has been damaged and removed by something mysterious. Sazed remembers the sentence, of course. Alendi must not reach the Well of Ascension. He must not be allowed to take the power for himself. And I said, all right, man, I need a call. What, who, or how was this done? You said.
It is perfectly removed in the same way in every copy, so I don't think it's someone mortal that came into the room. I think it's the mist creature that Vin sees. Something that I was assuming was going to happen during my first read-through was that there was going to be some sort of corrupted data on the Coppermind, that would have been a twist for sure.
Which we know to kind of be true, right? Like it's not as though the Coppermind itself was corrupted, right? It's not as though Ruin actually went in and altered the Coppermind. But whenever they took something out, wrote it down, and then, used it, it could be manipulated, which is how the Keepers were taught to do everything with their information. So,
right.
There's a chance that all of that knowledge has Ruin's taint on it.
That said, it's not the mist creature that was making the changes.
No, that removed the sentence. That was the ask. The mist creature did remove the sentence.
I thought it was talking about changing things in general.
No.
Yeah.
This was specifically about the sentence. Yep. Yeah. So
I assumed that the person removing that sentence was also the person changing the rest of the documents. I would have never guessed that it was two different people or two different beings making edits like that. But that is the case, technically. So the way you wrote this question makes me right, but my intention was broader, and I would have been wrong in that respect. Do you get what I'm saying?
I think that it's the mist creature that Vin sees.
Removing this sentence.
Mm-hmm.
But
so you thought that the mist creature was changing everything? Is that what you're saying?
In my mind, yeah.
I think you were pretty convinced that there were separate entities at that point.
No.
I would be curious to go back to the tape on that one.
Okay.
Just because I really thought that you had separated them out. You were like, I don't think they're the same thing.
The thing that's like changing text and then removing text?
Yeah.
No, I absolutely... I think I believed that it was all one thing, and I think I believed it was all the mist creature.
Okay. Yeah. I mean...
But then again, I can't remember what I had for breakfast today, because I don't eat breakfast typically. But my point is, like, my memory is shit, especially when it comes to things that I predicted or like what I thought in previous episodes and stuff. Like, I don't remember.
That's
I'm very
fair.
bad about that.
I still drink. Cheers. This is a spree for me here. All right, next up, we cut to Zane for a moment, and he mentions the voice in his head. God had never tried to convince him to kill her, but God does speak to Zane in those last few moments and lets him know that he wasn't insane. What moment? I wasn't looking for a prediction here. I remember this very clearly, but your response was a prediction, and so I was like, perfect.
So I said, it just sucks we don't get more out of this character here. I'm assuming we'll get more out of this somehow, maybe through the spike, but oof, what a great close.
Maybe it's through the spike, I think is specifically what you said, not maybe through the spike.
Maybe it's through that spike.
That reference was enough for everyone to freak the fuck out, because they didn't assume that they meant that you were going, like, the data was going to be, or like the conversation was going to be extracted from the spike. They believed that you believed that the voice came from the spike. And I think that was pretty much where you were at with it.
Yeah. I was thinking that there was some sort of something with the spike.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right. This is the last of the tin juice going down Urto's savior. Bottoms up.
By the way, I've been meaning to ask you, did you try those without the glitter? And does the glitter change the taste at all?
No, the only thing that I would say is that this one had a little bit more, because I was a little bit concerned about it shining through kind of the cloudiness that this one had. So I added more to it than the other ones. So my first sip almost had like a little bit of a texture to it. But after that, it was great. But I was just concerned about it, so I added more. So,
gotcha.
But I did try them all without, and then I did try them with, and then I filled them up because I had extra. So, because I made roughly 2.5 ounces of each to kind of put in. I made a little bit less of that one than intended. Actually, I didn't make less, fun fact. I made it, poured most of it in, and then accidentally emptied the shot glass into the sink. So without filling it, I filled it up like 5/6 of the way up, and I was like, oh, yeah, no, good, sweet. And I threw it out, and I was like, what? No. So I just poured just a little bit of mezcal on top, so it's just a little bit stronger than the recipe even cited. So just to fill it out.
That's funny.
Yeah. I fucked up. Okay. Next up, I'm switching, by the way, for those paying attention at home, to the lurch. Oh, sorry, I read the duh. Okay. That's why
he's like
nodded at
gesturing at me wildly, like, "Why aren't you reading?
Why aren't you reading? This one has your name next to it." After the conversation with spoiler. After the conversation with Elend about Ham and the army, Vin tracks down her Koloss friend, Human. They share a conversation about the mists, and Vin comes to some realizations. She believes the mists to truly be an enemy. Do you think they are? This is the most like straight up yes or no question I think I asked.
You gave me an yes or no.
Yeah.
I do. And I think they/it treated her well in the past because they needed her to act as a conduit for killing the Lord Ruler and eventually releasing Ruin. Now, the I do part, thinking it's an enemy, I'm wrong about that. And that was the question. But I'm still not entirely convinced that the rest of it isn't true. And it depends on how cosmic preservation could be. If preservation could say, yes, the Lord Ruler will like lock Ruin in his tomb for another 1,000 years, but Vin could put Ruin to rest in 4, nearly kill the world in the meantime, but ultimately save it at the end. I'll take that risk. Like I'm not convinced that it wasn't entirely.
I understand where you're going. I do want to go to something on this one, not the question itself, but your supposition now a little bit. And this is going to get just a tinge into Elantris stuff for those listening. Maybe skip ahead a couple of minutes. So, with that in mind, in the Ars Arcanum of Elantris, it points out a couple of things that are very important across the Cosmere magic systems in general, and that is intent. And things cannot diverge from their intent. And as such, these powers of gods are vestiges, or like the powers that they give have intents and they can only be used certain ways, and they have rules, right? And most of those rules are of in the case of Scadrial, are in the case of preservation or ruin. Like those are kind of what dictate them. The powers of preservation are feruchemy and allomancy, and as such, they're meant to preserve or allow people to move out of the way, strengthen themselves, dodge things, see things ahead of time. That's the intent. And preservation's intent is sort of a being of pure will to ensure that things survive and persist. Would say that despite being cosmic, that emotional intent that thing has, it is unable to break innately, which is also why it needed Vin, because Vin was of ruin and hadn't been inhabited by that power long enough to have changed and like molded itself to the power, if that makes sense. And that's why Vin is able to break with the code and actually annihilate it. So to that end, I think that it is not a giant cosmic game that Preservation was playing. I think Preservation was truly playing the long game of imprisonment is the best solution.
Okay. With that context, yeah, I'm with you. So,
and that's where the Cosmere gets really cool, because you start to cross beams from things that you read. You start to like just take those different components. I hit my mic stand. You start to take those different components and like merge them together to kind of build out a bigger picture of like, okay, what am I staring at here? Like, what's this whole thing?
Right.
Which is why it's so interesting that Sazed picks up these two things and becomes, merges them into one, because that effectively, it's not like it. So it merges their intents then, which is what makes him such an interesting character. It makes him a god not only of preservation of ruin, but of change and coexistence and all kinds of things. So, yeah, cool. All right.
Cool.
So I think you drink for that one. I think I'm solidly on the you drink side for that one. Okay.
Yeah.
Next up, we're introduced to Norden, an obligator and scholar of whom provides us with some factoids and numbers relating to the deaths in the mists as well as those afflicted. After some questions from Vin trying to pick at the numbers, Norden realizes that the number is precisely 16% across the board, no matter where you look. The question here, PJ, for both you and Vin, is why that number? You said
1 for every metal. We're aware of 14. I'm sure there are some additional missing ones. I think I'm right. Textually,
you are
explicitly right.
Mm-hmm.
But there's actually at least 18, right? because atium and malatium don't fit in the block of 16.
Right.
Yeah. So 1 for every metal. The intent is to be right, but there's actually more than that.
Here's the hard part. I think that's what they're going for. Yep. I think that's what the book is going for, and how it's communicating it to you, and what it assumes preservation, that humanity would know of preservation, as a clue that it could bake in, right? So I think that's right. So I am going to give you that and take the drink. Cool. Next up, Vin focuses in on one bit of the plate text from the very bottom. I have hidden his body well. What do you think this could be pointing towards?
The body of the god is the god's power, as mentioned before. So hiding Ruin's body somehow is what I assume is what this is pointing to. Ruin seems to think that this was done by preservation, but maybe the Lord Ruler was acting as a conduit of preservation, and maybe that's why there were multiple voices. I don't remember what I was talking about with the multiple voices. I don't know why that's here.
I think around that time we were talking, he was saying inside of that whole plate that he was hearing voices, right? But those were all Ruin from our understanding of the way that works. So
okay, gotcha. Okay, I think this is me.
It's kind of bullshitty.
It doesn't really answer anything.
The body of a god is the god's power, but that was explicitly textually mentioned. We know that.
Yeah.
So this doesn't really answer the question, but
and I think I was wrong in how I said this too. I think so. Hiding Ruin's power somehow is what I assume this is pointing to. Is what I meant to say on that.
Yeah. Even inside of that, just taking the second part of the question, that bit is wrong, which is why I think I decided just to keep it as opposed to having you try to rephrase it, because I was like, well, Lord Ruler's not acting as a conduit to preservation through the multiple voices that he's hearing. It's a tough one. Yep. I'm gonna give that to you, though. Okay, next up. Spook brings up something interesting here. He posits that the noblemen are immune to the mists. What do you make of this?
Any noble inherently has the possibility of being an allomancer, so my initial assumption is that those two observations are directly related. That's right, but that's dumb. That's a dumb bullshit answer.
You skirted it. It was like I
didn't say anything.
You put 2 dots on the map, and you're like, I should draw a line between those, but you didn't draw the line. However, I do think that you communicated the idea, and you freaked enough people out that I think they thought that you connected the dots, so I'll drink for that.
We'll drink for that. We'll push on that.
Okay, fair enough.
Because that wasn't my intention.
By the way, this one, the Lurch, delicious. This drinks like candy. It is so tasty. This one is dangerous.
I'm excited to see you tweak those a little bit and turn them into martinis as opposed to shots.
These are definitely, truthfully, it is a little bit, I'm not drinking them like a shot. I'm not taking these like a shot. I am drinking them like a drink. I'm saying for the people at home. I don't think that these are drinks. I think they're all cocktails. I think I made 4 cocktails, but half cocktails, or you could call them 2/3 cocktails or something like that. So yeah.
Perfect.
Honestly, the cocktail one that I made is the worst one of the bunch. The of preservation needs the most work. These are pretty good on their own. I think that one just needs a touch
that
more.
Glitter tastes good.
Delicious. I'm very curious as to what my teeth are going to look like when I'm done with this, because there's a decent amount of glitter.
Your pee looks like. Are you going to pee glitter?
Interesting. Or will I poop glitter?
Oh, you'll probably poop glitter.
Probably.
Or forever your
digested.
kidneys will be glittery.
Glitterified. Yeah. Sparkly unicorn. Develop, metastasize into awful cancer. Cool. With that, next one. This was not a question that I asked you. This is something that you came to as a conclusion. So there's not a whole lot more to say outside of, is Ruin a person? You said.
I'm just going to read exactly what we have written down here as my answer. Equal to preservation as a person. Ruin and preservation dated at one point. they decided to make this far off world their battleground.
This was me typing what you were saying because you were just like going off in like this fan fiction novel, and I was just like, so many ideas. Your own AO3 ruin and preservation dating novel. I love it.
And I mean, probably not. I don't know. We don't know the backstory of how they got here or how their power was split to begin with. That was a question posed by the book right at the end. So I'm not going to say I'm wrong entirely.
I think it's fair to push. I feel like this is one that we don't... The latter half of your question is wrong, but I think that we don't get an answer to the question itself that was posed, which is Ruin a person? We do see a body fallout of both preservation and of Ruin, but we know that, you know, there was a short, stocky dude that fell out of the clouds that was preservation with a long nose, and then you've got a red-haired guy who fell out when Ruin died. You know, we don't get a whole lot of else than that. Were they people? Are they just, you know, what is what?
Was that their avatar of some sort?
Yeah. So
is that,
I say push.
I'm assuming, based on the fact that Vin vanished, I'm assuming the power of preservation and the power of Ruin are themselves separate from the people that wield them. So whenever Vin annihilated herself, she fell out of the sky because she had preservation's power. So these two people are the people previously that were mortals that took that power, ascended, disappeared, and then fell out of the sky when they died. But it doesn't mean that they themselves were that entity, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's kind of my thought. But then again, Vin maintained her memories and her understanding and her personship as a god. So it's hard to make implications there without more information.
Very true. I think that does. Yeah. So I say push. Cheers. This is why I wrote this one down, because I was like, this is kind of a difficult one to answer, and one that I knew that we didn't get an answer to strictly in this book. So that'll be fun. PJ has
some
broken
ASMR.
Yep. Ooh. Shatter. For the record, Discord cuts all of this, so I can't hear it, but I'm sure it sounds great on the tape. All right. We've got our final prediction here. We've made it to the end, PJ, of the predictions that we've been hanging on to. This one, Marsh, the last Inquisitor, is lying there, and she's being consumed by the power, a vast, incredible power. And we cut to Marsh's perspective, and he's won at this point. It will all be okay. It's going to end, and he made a difference for the girl that he loved and his brother and the rebellion at large. Vin pulls out one of his metal spikes, and the pain is there as it leaves his eye, and then poof, Vin vanishes.
What? Where'd she go? Poof. Poof. One of the metals she decided to burn caused this, or it was a cosmic transportation to a different planet or to the Well of Ascension. So this was this was our, the end of our second to last section of this book, right?
Yep. Penultimate episode.
Yep. So I drank for that.
73. Yep.
I assumed she left the world. Really. That is wrong.
Yep. Indeed it is. Good work. We got through these. This is a fun little experiment to kind of take the dry July and then to pay them all off at once. You know, not as trashed as we were afraid of being by the end of this. But honestly, definitely intoxicated.
I think it worked out so well that we ended dry July when we did. Or we were at this part of the book when we ended dry July. Like, we finished it at the end of July. So I like paying these off all at once, because now I've got my brain firing on what's been going on throughout the entire series and what I was thinking. So I don't know. I've got a little bit more backwards context for our conversations.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. Okay, man. Well, next up is going to be the sort of questions that we had submitted to us, fan questions and people of whom support our podcast. We've got people from Patreon. We've got people from Instagram. We have people from Twitter. So we're going to answer those questions. As many of them as we can get to, of course. So we're getting into these Patreon questions or questions from our patrons. We'll start there. I'm kind of going to jump over a little bit, but we'll mention people's names, of course. I'd like to kind of start it simple. I like the first one that we have here. It's the first one that we had submitted from anyone in regards to this finale, and it's from Artificer. Given the choice, would you rather be an allomancer or a ferrochemist? Peter, what do you think?
I love the idea of ferrochemy. I do. And I think if I had to like roll the dice and either be maybe a Mistborn or definitely like you can access everything, you're a ferrochemist, I'd choose ferrochemy. But if I got to choose to be a Mistborn, I think I'd choose Mistborn, you know?
Yeah, okay, so I guess allomancer, I want to be specific. So you choose to be a Mistborn as opposed to a ferrochemist, because I think
but I choose ferrochemy over any, like over a misting in any sense.
Yeah, right.
Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because there are more powers for a ferrochemist. So you would choose, though, being a Mistborn over a ferrochemist.
I think so.
Okay. I think I'm on the other side. I think I'd choose to be a ferrochemist. I think ferrochemy has a ton of cool capabilities, and I think there's a lot more nuance to it than there is with allomancy. I think I've said that before. It's a lot more internally focused. It's a lot more you focused, and I feel like that would be something that I would prefer as far as, you know, kind of those manipulations go. I could
flip-flop on this basically any minute you ask me, I'm sure. It's a tough call. And I think it entirely depends on what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. So like if my normal day would be more well suited as a Mistborn, or like more well supported as a Mistborn with like access to steel and iron and needing to see things very particularly with tin. Those would be the three main ones, I think. I think it'd be tin, steel, and iron that I'd want access to. And you can do that. Those are steel and iron are the ones that are so very different from, like, they don't have a one-to-one comparison with ferrochemy, you know?
Yeah, right. And there are a number of things that you benefit from as an ally. Like, I don't besmirch you for your choice of being a Mistborn by any means. I also agree with you that I could probably be swayed in less than 30 seconds to think that being a Mistborn is better. But, you know, I think we're both kind of going on gut instinct as to like what feels better, you know, for you daily.
I think it'd be truly what I would use it for is grabbing stuff from a distance and like throwing stuff away. Imagine having a dog toy with a little metal bead on the inside of it, and I get to just like play fetch with my dog without actually throwing anything all day. He'd love that. I'd love that. It'd be awesome.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
I'm really frustrated with this car in front of me. I'm just gonna go ahead and push you out of the way a little bit and keep on driving.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I think those would be what I'd actually use on a daily basis. So then again, copper mines are fucking crazy.
Yeah, the knowledge, the ability to store strength, the kind of idea that you could take these different aspects of yourself and kind of tuck them away to use later, I think would be great. Because there are a lot of times, you know, sitting at my desk working here, I don't need, you know, all my muscles. I could work through some fatigue and store that strength and then, you know, use it later. There is kind of I do have a general question that this is more of I would posit, do ferrochemists need to like work out to maintain their physique? You know, like I assume so. Yeah. Like usual physique, like what their baseline is.
And is it a proportion or is it like a strict number? Like, if you,
I guess I'm not even thinking about it that strictly. I'm thinking like a lot of ferrochemy is based on storing certain traits, right? So you can store things like weight to make yourself lighter temporarily and then make yourself heavier, right? You could do that for quite some time in theory. You could make yourself a waif for a long time. Wouldn't be great for you, of course, but you would have a bunch of weight then stored in a steel mine that you could use later.
So I guess you can store strength, right?
Yeah.
and become stronger later.
Yep.
So if your baseline is at a point where you can do, I don't know, because this is hard to quantify in most respects, but going on strength, how much can you bench press, to go back to like the high school respectable like strength analogy? How much can you bench? And if you can bench double what you could before, does that equate to double
the stored strength?
The stored strength.
I'm not even trying to get into the ferrochemy side of things, if that makes sense. Okay. I'm not even thinking about like the quant. I think that the answer to your question is yes. I think it would double your strength if you had more strength. My question is do you need to stay fit at all? Because you can, store, like you just don't. It seems like you just don't. Like you don't have. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
that is kind of my question.
I think at a certain point, I guess it depends on how much you're relying on your steel or your metal mines. So if you're always going to have it, and I think you can store things while you're sleeping, right?
Oh my God. Yes. Well, yeah. Meditating. Maybe sleeping. I don't remember. Don't remember
either. But
I just want to mention Claude and Secure so fucking good. I just got to that one.
Yeah, he muted his microphone and said, "Oh my God," while I was talking.
I did because oh my God, this is the winner for sure of the group. Anyway, so sorry. To your point, sleeping though and charging metal mines.
Well, I think you'd go about your day slowly tapping strength, like very lightly tapping strength all day. But when you're like not doing anything and you're not around people, you're just slowly storing it up as well. So I don't think you have to do anything to stay in shape, as long as you have your metal mines with you and you're willing to like very slowly use them day by day.
Okay. Yeah.
Would you still sign up for an Ironman, or would you feel too cheaty about it?
I think that feels super cheaty. You'd have to have a different race. That's the thing. Like that would be the thing. You would have it wouldn't be the Ultra Iron Man. It would be the
Steel Man. Which one's speed?
It'd be the Aloe Man.
It'd be the Aloe Man.
It'd be the Aloe Man for sure. Yeah.
Ferroman?
Ferroman could work if you want people that only were ferrochemists, I guess.
Oh, you're going to allow like Mistborn in on this.
Yeah, but they don't get coins. Like, you don't get to carry a lot of shit on you in the Iron Man.
No, you don't need coins to, like, I don't know, if there's metal anywhere on the ground, you can just jump and, like, launch yourself across entire distances.
Well, I think that's the idea, is that you would have to set it up so that people would have to very cleverly use their metals. More like an obstacle course than you would more like an obstacle course.
Mm-hmm.
Less like it would be less like an Iron Man as it stands, and more like a Tough Mudder.
Okay,
I think that would be
kind of like American Ninja Warrior.
Yeah, which is kind of like Tough Mudder's, like kind of, but a little bit endurance-y.
I can't believe I called it America Ninja Warrior, because I used to watch Ninja Warrior as a kid on G4 all the time, and I can't believe I delineated that.
You a big dumb dummy.
Big dumb dummy.
No, I do really like that. I think that could be a really fun race. I like how this spun out of the ferrochemy allomancy question. I think that's a good place to leave that one. I think that this will be a fun one to talk about next week. So I'm going to store some of the other questions that I have here, because there's some, like, again, going back to the misting or taking, this is a stupid thing, but I'm just going to spoil it, quote, there are people who have just one ferrochemical ability, and they're called fairings. So just like a misting, it's a fairing. So, if you didn't have like a fairing ability, what will it be? But I think we'll save that for the wrap up, kind of.
That's really interesting, especially because we've only interacted with.
It is most definitely, it's revealed right away in the beginning of the next book, right away, like first 4 pages. But it is something that changes between the books. This is the most spoiling that I'm doing for you in this entire series. That is something that changes between eras in a genetic way.
Oh, I mean, it makes sense. Like, everyone started out as a Mistborn, and they got diluted over time through the through generations. So I can see that making sense.
This one's so cool.
It's super sparkly, man.
It's so much. Yeah, I know. I like it. It stands out way more in that one for some reason. Well, it's because the other ones are more translucent, and so kind of see it through it. And this is more of a like solid. So it appears and it gives the fun little wavy boys. Okay. Moving on from that one. From Sharkbait, we have an excellent question. This is a 10 out of 10 spicy AF question here from our wonderful patron, Sharkbait. What would your perfect poop room look like? And I added some sub-questions for us to talk about here. But PJ, what would your perfect pooping room look like? What's your throne of dissension look like? Declination.
Oh, man. I think it's circular.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Circular.
I'm imagining it as circular, which I think maybe I'm taking it because like that room, the pooping room in this book is circular, right?
I mean, yeah, I think it's a kind of a hut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's very subterranean and very, very quiet, very isolated, insulated from any sort of noise, cold. I think it's going to be like very like ambient cold.
Okay.
I don't think I need a lot of amenities to it. You know, like I don't want a bunch of giant like TVs, and I just want a nice quiet space, nicely like minimalist sort of decorations, just pleasant to sit in, but not distracting. I don't know. Cold basement pooping room.
Okay. I dig. I like the idea. The cold is very specific, actually. And I'm not saying that I agree or disagree, but I don't know that I've ever paid attention to temperature. I don't know if that's ever been like a factor in my head. More of a comfortability thing. I, in general, run very hot, so I like colder spaces. I keep my place pretty. I mean, I think by most people's standards, I keep mine at like 70. I have to sleep at like 69, 68, you know? Like, I have to sleep a lot colder, but...
There was a bathroom in the science building at St. Mary's when I went there that I don't think it had a heater in the bathroom itself, but it was like right next to a heat output of some sort. Yeah. So it was like uncomfortably warm all the time.
And then you get like clammy legs.
The porcelain was warm.
Oh. I was just imagining getting warm on the toilet, not like the porcelain being warm. Yeah, okay.
I mean, that too. But like when the ambient temperature is just warm, it's not pleasant to sit there. It just feels really gross. Something about it being cold feels more sterile, feels more clean. And I also run warm, so.
Yeah. Okay. I've got some follow-up questions. I do want to lean into the follow-up questions, and then maybe we'll switch and rotate. So, some important questions about amenities. You said, low on amenities, but I want to just check on some preferences here. In your perfect poop room, bidet? No bidet?
Bidet. Absolutely.
Bidet? Okay.
I don't have a lot of experiences with them, but the experiences that I have are very good.
Little footstool? No footstool?
I'm tall enough. I've never needed one. I've never used one.
So that doesn't necessarily change. That doesn't change the question, right? Because the idea of the footstool is to align your body so that it's easier, right? Like it aligns your colon. Just being taller doesn't align your colon.
It does, though.
A little bit,
I'm,
but it's not
naturally squatting more by sitting down.
That's fair. I guess the idea is to tuck your knees more, so your knees are probably higher to your chest on average than.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I guess I was imagining like raising the platform up a little bit and then like giving you a stool. Like was my.
What's the point?
Making it more like a throne. Well, just to make it more like a throne. Comfy.
Okay.
Okay. Would you do that? Yes or no?
Probably not.
Probably not. Okay. There you go.
If it was a problem, I'd just make a shorter toilet.
Fair enough.
I'm assuming this is
sense.
Mine. This is
yours.
Me,
yes. This is just for you. Yes.
Just for me.
Yep.
If that was an issue, I'd just make the toilet a little bit shorter.
That's so interesting. Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. I mean, it totally works. It's that's the other solution. So
yeah.
Cool. All right. So bidet, no bidet. Of course, we went there, and then we asked the stool, no stool. With, let's say you didn't have a bidet, does your toilet paper go under or over?
Well, you still use toilet paper.
I know, but it's mostly to wipe up and like dry off more than it is anything else.
Yeah.
So I guess, okay, the question stands, under or over?
Like over the top.
So over, not under. I over is the correct answer because then you don't pull it against the wall because it like,
and you have more space to grab it.
Right. Yep. Proximity to the wall is less from the roll, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
From the point at which you touch as well. Easier to access.
This might be giving away too much information for Tim Olson, but his
No, he
bathroom.
won't care.
So he agrees with us in the positioning.
The murder basement one, or
no, the one upstairs.
Oh.
And maybe it's changed since, but I believe, and maybe I'm misremembering it, but I believe what the issue was when he had it the overway, the like air vent in his bathroom was positioned in such a way that it would entirely unspool his toilet paper. So he had to flip it the other way. So when it spun, it wouldn't unspool.
Yeah, that's totally right. That's totally accurate. I had totally forgotten about that. That was exactly what happened. I remember because he came in one night when we were during kind of like COVID time when we were all playing League together and whatnot before we started the show, and totally said, I came into my bathroom twice to like a completely unspooled toilet paper, and you would have thought that I lived with a cat, and I finally figured it out after the second roll that it was the air vent.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a good one.
So that's the only situation in which you would go under, but
okay.
Over just makes more sense
down.
to me. I think it looks nicer. I don't care so much about the function of it. I think it looks nicer.
Okay.
Because more or less the function is the same.
Yeah, I think there's a slight cleanliness thing to it because you're so like the function is mostly the same, but like putting your hand against the wall, where's your hand go before that? What's on the wall? Do you have to clean the because you basically have to touch the wall to get the underside of toilet paper more often than not. So
fair. Yeah.
Anyway, regardless, final question: what's your hand soap scent of choice?
I like a lot of different scents.
You got to pick one.
I know. Also, I think they change throughout the year.
That's reasonable, but you got to pick one for your perfect pooping room.
Perfect pooping room. Something maybe, God damn it, rosemary. I think I'm going to go with rosemary.
Okay.
I love the smell of rosemary. And it's not only because I have a sprig of rosemary, right?
You just do in general. We've talked about this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But also like different herbs like that. Sage, I think, makes a really good scent. I love citrus, but that doesn't fit the vibe I'm going for in my pooping room. You know?
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. I would agree with you. I would not go with the citrus hand soap.
Yeah. So definitely something a little bit more herbal or not smoky, but kind of more on the how would you describe it? Savory side of smells.
Yeah. I know precisely what my hand soap of choice is.
All right.
I'm dialed in on that one.
All right, let's go with you then.
All right. Perfect pooping room. Looks like a fusion of Hieronymus Boschian artwork and Salvador Dali. So the walls are melting. Everything is bad. Everything looks like it's dying. It's just chaos everywhere as you walk in. And, assortment of colors and splatters and some weird looking dude with an elephant and like 4 penises hanging off of his face. And they're kind of melting into the sun. And that's kind of your vibe as you walk into the room.
Okay.
To start. Okay. Definitely not that, actually.
I wanted to see where you went with it.
For sure not. I just wanted to see if I'd break you and be like, why the fuck would you want that? I was wondering how far I could push you, and I just didn't want to go too far.
I feel like that something like that could have a place, though.
It totally could in an art museum.
No, but
I know.
If you've got a very large house with every room is kind of themed out, and you have like the weird art bathroom, like I could see it happening.
Yeah,
I could
definitely
see you
not
doing
unreasonable. It's definitely not unreasonable. It is not what I would do for my perfect pooping room, though. Okay. I think I agree with you. I think it'd be pretty minimalist. I'd probably have some things that I find comforting around me. I've bought a couple of pieces of artwork for a bathroom before. Like when I lived in New York, I bought some New York themed stuff. I think I would do something that makes me feel either at home in the place that I live in the moment. So, New York, or like beachy, and kind of go with the vibe that feels the best. So I'd probably, in a perfect world, perfect pooping room, I think I'd probably still go with like the New York, some like tile on the ground, some like heated tile when necessary. I think that's a nice touch. I agree with you. I think a little bit colder, but not too cold, because I think you can get the opposite problem where you land on the toilet and like you get the butt freezicles. That's not real, but colder, not cold, but not like modern. I don't like black modern stuff looks great and fine, but I don't think that's what I'd want in the perfect pooping room. I would take my little stool. I'd have my little perfect throne stool, give me a squatty potty, but make it look fancy, like I'm a king, a lord ruler, perhaps, style. Little buttons of ATM. And you kind of have it like a little bit elevated next to a couple of sinks, a pair of sinks. I think my perfect pooping room would also have a spa attached, like a nice little, you'd have like a little sweat room in it for either before or after.
Absolutely.
Depending.
So
yep.
I could go way into more detail.
Right.
If we're talking about like the other things that this bathroom would be, including like shower and sauna and stuff like that.
I'm not going to go into shower. I just mentioned sauna because I think sauna is important. See, I agree with you. I just want to mention sauna because I think sauna is specifically important to the act of letting it go.
All right.
To drop in the deuce, as it were. So I would go sauna close by.
Okay.
With that, going down the list of questions, bidet, no bidet, definitely bidet. Under, over, we know where I stand on this. It's obviously over. What was the other question that I asked you that was kind of off the cuff?
Hand soap?
I did ask hand soap. I was thinking the stool. The stool is, I'd already mentioned the ATM button stool. And the hand soap would be a mahogany teak wood, because that is like the perfect blend of like smoky, like you were saying, but a little bit savory, but it's not too smoky. Like it's like you were saying, it's kind of like the savory, woodsy. The other option is like a cool charcoal mint.
Okay.
Those are the two options for hand soaps.
Gotcha.
I would go the first before the second, but
fair enough. One question I have: floor texture.
I think tile, like I was saying, like I stand by. So large tile, not small.
Large tile.
Yep.
Glossy or no?
No, straight tile.
Good man. Okay.
Yeah.
I hate really glossy tile floors. Specifically because of
mid-gloss
showers.
Is okay. Yes.
And like it feels like wet and then it cools down and it just feels clammy and gross.
It's a lot of metal. We'll see.
So either like cement or like matte tile finish.
Cement? Ugh.
I don't know. Like a not gloss finish.
Yes, a non-gloss finish. I can agree with that. Yeah.
Okay,
for sure. Yeah,
we went off on pooping room, but I think it's important.
Great question. This was our recurring bit for this series, one of the recurring bits. So this was excellent. That was an accident. I don't know how it happened. I don't know how we got there. That's most of our recurring bits. We don't plan this shit, and it turned into one of my favorites. That we just every time I mentioned the Lord Ruler's place, you turned it into a pooping room joke, and so I was like, "Fuck, I guess we're here." So yeah. All right, moving on. We have a question. We have a lot of questions from Ragnar, so we're going to break these up to kind of segment them a little bit. But the first one here, do you want to read it?
Sure. With what you know now, how powerful do you think Vin and Ellen's kids will grow up to be? And we kind of had that prospect last episode, I think.
This question actually came in before we hit the end of the book. And this was supposed to be one that I was maybe going to ask you before we got to the end and Vin and Ellen died. So it was supposed to be kind of a tragedy of sorts. But that said, you were saying about the power.
How powerful do you think Vin and Ellen's kids would have been? Would be the right way to phrase that.
I think between Vin and Ellen, they would be more powerful on average than Mistborn, but it wouldn't compound to be more powerful. They would still be losing something in dilution because neither of them are pure, I guess, if that makes sense. There's close, like Ellen is the most powerful. Like Ellen is at the top of the hierarchy as far as powerful Mistborn go. He's effectively a pure Mistborn Allomancer. Vin is heavily diluted but still more powerful on average because of her connection to preservation, sort of the intent there and the way that she was guided and given more capabilities earlier.
Yeah.
So,
I think based on what we know about the genetics of everything, they'd be Mistborn. I think I would assume they would be Mistborn 9 times out of 10. And I think always, no, not always Allomancers.
They would at least be Mistings, but
right. I'm trying to like make the assertion that 2 Mistborn will create a Mistborn. And
you would think that would have
more dilution by not having 2 Mistborns, like having one and a Misting or not Allomancer in general.
I think I agree with you mostly. I think the problem is that if that were such a big thing, why wouldn't Brandon have made it a bigger deal? You know what I mean? Like, he didn't make a big deal of Mistborn marrying Mistborn at all, or people with Allomantic capabilities, probably because Ellen didn't have any, so it didn't make sense from a story perspective. But that was never brought into...
I agree.
I get exactly what you're saying. I'm just saying that it was interesting that that's also not a plot point.
I think it should have been, because he does such a like wide-ranging job of explaining things, and this goes so unexplained that I feel like no matter what, we're kind of left wondering what it would be, you know?
Yeah.
There's not a default here.
Right.
We just know that it dilutes over time, but that dilution is from diluting that gene. But if you both have that gene to a certain extent, it's not getting diluted. So it really just kind of depends. Like, to me, it depends on like how much this is strictly about whether or not the powers exist or how strong the powers are, you know?
Yes. Fair point. Great point. Yeah. There is some delineation there that needs to happen. I know you haven't read. How much do you know of Harry Potter, period? Like, if you had to put it on a spectrum, 1 out of 10, like 1 to 10. Sorry, not 1 out of 10.
Like, about the underlying magic system?
Yeah, the capabilities of the users, right? So, like, no one. People have inherently different power, and that's kind of willy-nilly inside of the Harry Potter world. Like, it's not as well defined as it is here. However,
my understanding is that it's not defined at all, and some people are able to do it and some people aren't, and it seems bloodline related for the most part.
But occasionally outside of bloodline, right? So it's like the mudblood idea and sort of the racism that happens inside of the story.
So the mudblood idea, is that an underlying genetic trait that somewhere up the line we
don't have the answer. I guess that's my problem there. So we don't have the answer to that system.
Fantasy bullshit garbage.
We don't strictly have the answer, I should say. So,
write your fucking rules, then write the book.
Oh, God. Okay, so the point being, we don't necessarily have the answer. I just wanted to draw the comparison because I think that, like, the idea that people can randomly pop up with powers, it may be something from a long-distant bloodline. It could be any number of things only J.K. Rowling knows, and she's a piece of shit. So I guess I'm not looking to kind of interrogate that. I just wanted to bring it up as a comparison of a different genetic magic system, right? That's not about capability so much, and to say that, like, you can approach some really nasty stuff when you start to think about, like, genetic magic systems innately promote like a pure blood thing when you get to this top level, which is innately bad because of ethical moralism. So tough.
If you're jumping into a system that there is genetic superiority, does that change the definition of that moralism?
Here's the tough part about the series. The series actually doesn't interrogate that well. The only character that really gets to interrogate it and is given kind of enough efficacy to do so over the course of the entire story is Spook, of whom is kind of defined by his lack of abilities for the most part, having considered like the lowest of the powers, being given a power, seeing that it's not all that it's cracked up to be, and then having it taken away, right? And kind of going through that arc of more power isn't necessarily better. That's kind of what Spook stands to reason. Not entirely, but a little bit.
Kind of, until you get to the epilogue. And
that's what I'm saying. Like, the story doesn't back itself up, which is, again, another reason that I think I have a hard time with it. And at the same time, Ellen explores that in the first 2 books. And then again, that entire argument disappears when he's revived with the metal stone. So, like, the book gets halfway to saying something about genetic magic systems, and then every time just pulls it away before we can, like, really say that, like, someone without it, like, you can be a fantastically impactful human being without this. But most of the series relies so much on these magic people that it's like, it's so tough to, make that
closest you get is
insertion. Yes, right. And he's kind of the piece of shit character, though. He's kind of the shit heel. Doxson, that's the next closest you get.
Yeah.
He's an oppressed person, so I think that makes sense, but he dies before he sees fruition. So I think that those are some of the issues that I have thematically that I kind of would like to have resolved. I don't think that Brandon's trying to make a statement about it either. I don't think he was thinking about that. So I'm not pinning the blame. I'm just saying that we also can't really draw conclusions on this from the text, really, because it doesn't have a whole lot to say about that.
Yeah. I also think that...
Which I think is a small flaw, but it's okay.
Taking that and extrapolating it into real-world morals falls apart because you're dealing with such intense degrees of hyperbole and magnification when it comes to, like, these more superior traits that you're talking about. And it's almost to the point where you can't even make that connection and draw that, like, comparison.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not approaching, like, Red Rising levels of distinction between, and, like, intentional breeding and things like that kind of, like, make itself more of a, I agree with you. I think is kind of the long and short of it. It is so hyperbolic to drive it that direction. However, I think it would have been really easy to have had this story make a statement about genetic magic systems. That's not what Brandon was going for. Like, and you thematically, that's not what these books are about. Yeah. Yeah, he was making a genetic magic system, too, actually. And he has a non-genetic magic system in the form of hemalurgy. So, like, anyone can be given these abilities. And in the form of
allomancy.
Well, kinda.
Like,
very limited. Though. Yes, very limited. It
perpetuates itself genetically.
Yes.
But it's not only given to you genetically. You can be imbued with this magic without having it innately, which is really, really interesting. The source of the magic propagates through genetics, but the initial source isn't genetic and isn't inherent. It is an external magic source.
The entire thing is an external magic source, so that's where it becomes funky. I wasn't necessarily saying no to your position so much as there are further complications that have not been explored yet. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that this is a great example of something that continues to kind of go throughout the series. I think this is something that is continually explored. I also think that Brandon came to realize that this was, after this book, steered away from it a little bit more. Because it's the accessibility of magic, I think, was something that was a little bit more. The idea that, and this is kind of something that J.K. Rowling is famous for, with, like, the idea of, like, mudbloods or, like, people of whom, don't have blood. The idea that anyone could get their letter to Hogwarts, right, is something that perpetuates in kids' heads. So it's like, oh, I could go, like, I could become a wizard. So I think that's something that Brandon kind of steered away from. And that's where, like, we're talking about this and I'm comparing it to a YA novel because this novel sits solidly nebulously between YA and adult fiction. Like, it is very, it's super reasonable. Like, you could totally hand this to a kid, a teenager, and they could read it super reasonably. And also, it's really entertaining for us. Like, that's why we're talking about it on the show, because it's great.
There's so little as far as, like, explicitly touchy subjects.
Right. Yeah.
Is there any explicit language in the book at all?
Damns thrown around.
Okay.
A couple of times, I think.
That's kind of at the point where I don't even consider that a swear word.
I mean,
truly, in my own personal life, I wouldn't even think about it that way. So, yeah, but you're right.
Definitely damn. Let me just
hell,
check.
Maybe.
No shits. No fuck. Lots of hells.
Does cunt
plenty
exist?
Of dams. I don't. Definitely not said. I didn't need to search that, but I did type it in. So no shits, no fucks, but plenty of dams. No bitch. This is all in Hero of Ages, of course, but yeah. So language is minimal, but we kind of knew that. They also have placeholder swear words in the form of, like, Lord Ruler and, other shit like that. Yeah.
I opened up Apollo
Hero. Good. Nice.
Really good.
It looks really cool. That, by the way, that can art reminds me of KCBC.
Here's the...
Yeah, I saw it when you turned. It reminds me of KCBC. It looks very much like their can art.
So here's the Valkyrie.
Nice. Kind of, yep.
And...
Oh, nice.
I like
that. Yeah.
I want to go back and say a little bit. Valkyrie Hero. I do really like this beer. I think it's problematic to call it a hazy, not problematic, but deceptive to call it a hazy IPA because it drinks very much like a West Coast. Sorry.
No worries. To that point, folks, at this point, we've only been going 2.5 hours. I finished all my drinks. And as such, I've opened up a beer, Edward Teach's Last Stand, which I bought because I was like, this is kind of funny. It's very namesakey. It's a hazy it's a hazy IPA. Jesus Christ. It's a Mosaic and Citra packed beer, whirlpooled, dry hopped fermentation, second dry hop of Strata. So pretty classic. I do also love the can art here with all of the swords going through the heart. It looks very cool, and it's very different than their usual can art. So
nice.
I dig it. It tastes really good. Exactly as you'd expect is kind of the way that I would describe it.
Awesome.
So wrapping up that kind of question, how powerful do you think their kids would be? Less. I think my answer is less.
I have a hard time saying less. I think that there's a potential for them being less, but I think there's also a potential for them being more powerful than Vin.
Oh, fair point. Less powerful than Elend, more powerful than Vin. Yeah. I think I would see that degradation. Yeah.
You'll see a slight degradation, but it'll average like genetics. It'll average out between the parents.
Right. Yes. Average between. Yeah. That makes sense to me. Cool. All right. We move on to Ivana here. We've got a great question. Do the Koloss have a future in the new world? There's one only for you.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think the Koloss that currently exist will be allowed to exist, I guess, but I don't think they'll exist for very long. And it feels very grossly unethical to allow those Koloss to continue to exist from a leadership standpoint, because you have to take dying but not dead people, right? He grabs somebody who's unconscious but not a body.
Yeah, right.
So I don't think that there's a place for that within whatever society it rises from this, whatever government rises. That'd be a tough one to swallow.
Yeah, I think it would be a very hard pill to swallow. It begs the question. So Sazed, having picked up these powers, can make changes to the world. Do you think he would change the Koloss? Or do you think that he would let them naturally expire? I
think he'd let them naturally expire. I think he could potentially explore other creatures that are similar. But I think he'd probably do it in, I don't know, maybe in something that's not strictly human, maybe in livestock, creating beasts of burden within the same hemalurgical system, doing things that can be used as tools, but not relying on human fuel, so to speak.
Okay.
See where I'm going with that a little bit?
Yeah. Alter the way that Koloss are created. Yeah. And ultimately the way they're utilized, as opposed to being an army, in a semi-sentient army, being a species of beast of burden, or several species of beasts of burden. Yeah.
Imagine giant fucking horses that can carry entire quarter the amount of horses you need to pull a carriage and shit like that. I think you could be very productive with it.
I'm not gonna lie, when I heard Koloss in the very first book, and 2 or 3 times that I think it was mentioned, I was like, that's so mysterious and vague. And I truly thought of the Koloss not as humanoids, but how much of the X-Men do you know?
Not a ton.
Okay.
What's in the movies?
Okay, so the Sentinels, which are the really big robot dudes that are a couple of stories tall. I imagine the Koloss that big. I imagine them huge, larger than ogres, like like giants, truly
20,
giants.
30 feet tall.
Yeah, exactly. When I heard about them, and I was like, whoa. And I just imagined them as much bigger. And so it's interesting when you finally approach them, and they are smaller. They get up to, I think, 12 feet tall, which is still crazy.
Yeah,
it's a story
human's
tall.
12, and that's like abnormally tall even for them.
Right. And the Sentinels, I think, get about 2 stories tall, so 15 or 30-ish feet, or between 20 and 30 feet. But yeah, that was kind of my comparison point. That was where my brain went immediately. I imagine them being fewer, but massive. Sorry, I'm trying to look up X-Men height because I'm just curious as to how tall they actually are. That's not what I'm looking for. How tall? Okay, 20 to 25 is the average height of the Sentinel. So, a couple of bodies taller, a couple of Koloss taller. So they're still big by all means, and I'm not trying to shirk anything. It was just where my brain went with the first picture. And so I can easily imagine something that large being a beast of burden, like an ogre, like a troll is kind of utilized in Lord of the Rings by the armies of Morgoth and whatnot. So cool. Another one from Ivana. Will everyone be an Elemancer in the next generations, in the future generations? Will they share powers? Could everyone be a ferrochemist? I'm just adding a couple of things here to kind of pause it. What are your thoughts on the future generations and their relationship to the metallic arts?
I mean, we know for sure that it's a genetic system, and we don't know of any like mistborn relationships that have yielded children, and Alamancers are pretty fucking rare. So no, I don't think everyone will be. I think it'll be a lot more prevalent because they'll understand how to snap people in a more reasonable way. As opposed to beating them. Everyone will be exposed to the mists at a certain age when they're at the height of their strength, I suppose. If the mists still exist, actually, that's a good question because they got cleared out. So if they come back, no, I don't think everyone will be. I think it'll be a little bit more prevalent, but I think overall the genetics of the people aren't changing unless Sazed decides to change them. I don't quite see a reason why he would.
I want to add a question here that comes in later from Ragnar because I think it ties in. Do you think Sazed will turn into like a misting claws going around making a bunch of mistborns? Do you think he'll make a bunch of mistings? Kind of to this point, I think it kind of extends the question in a direction. He did change Spook, of course. Do you think that he would make any other genetic changes, being that he's the guy in charge? He can change and control things,
If I think
kind
about
of gets to remake the world
character,
in his image.
This feels like a very boring answer, and I don't think it's the case because there's more books in this. Like there's in Era 2 to Mistborn, which I would assume follows a similar storyline on the same planet, just by assumption. I don't know that for sure, but I think so.
A similar storyline meaning the conflict of the powers?
I mean, a story about Allomancy and Ferrochemy.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yep.
But if I'm looking at Sazed as a character, and if he has the ability to do stuff genetically, I think he would just eliminate Allomancy, Ferrochemy, Hemalurgy entirely because it's been problematic from a power standpoint. I think he'd remove the magic system from the people entirely.
That interesting. That would also mean inherently he would be pulling out the chunks of preservation of these people, right? So removing the magic system also involves removing the inherent nature of the creation of these folks, right? And the sentience that they're given and things like that. Yeah. Right. So I understand where you were going with that. I think that is a possibility. However, considering some of the rules, I think that Sazed would probably avoid that because he likes life. But
then I could see it happening, putting everybody on a level ground. But even then, that would require everyone to become Mistborn, because in fucking bronze user, you're effectively not a misting on your own.
I mean, you're a seeker, right? As a bronze user, you're thinking copper.
I'm thinking copper.
Yeah. And you're countered by hemalurgy, like a tin hemalurgist. That's so shitty. You're literally countered so easily.
My point stands, though, that I think Sazed will do what he can to put people on a more level ground.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to dissuade you from that point. I think that that's solid.
Based on our understanding of the magic system and how it's developed and perpetuated genetically, I think that becomes a very difficult thing to do in a very really balanced way. And no, I don't think everyone will be, but maybe it'll be more prevalent. Strictly because now we understand that it's not just noble people that can be snapped.
Right. It's anyone. It's just that we didn't, the Scott didn't go out, or they didn't recognize it. They never ingested metal. And so they never, tested it. So, yep. Okay. All right. I dig that. Thanks, Ivana, for those questions. And thank you to Ragnar for supplementing that. So to get into one that's a little bit spoilery for Elantris again, we're going to do this, probably a 5-minute conversation again. Skip forward if you need to. From Ragnar, do you think there's any relation of the pool that was in the center of Elantris to the well that held ruin and the Mistborn seeds, or whatever they're actually called? I would throw in the Pits of Hathsin into this question as well.
You'd throw in the Pits of Hathsin?
I mean, yeah. The pits and the well are directly compared. That's not a big jump. Yeah. I
mean, I think it's very clear to me from reading Elantris that the pool is directly related to the well, because it's described the same. And now we have a character that was there and is now here, presumably going through that pool and into the well, coming out of the well.
By character, who do you mean? Can you specify?
Hoyd.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. And that's why I'm confused by your assertion that the Well of Ascent, or that the Pits of Hathsin would have a similar connection.
I really mean it more as an aggregation set of power, I think, was more my assertion. Okay. Less that it's immediately comparable. Because you made the comment that you thought that there was going to be a well at the bottom of the pits, right? The same kind of idea. I think that it's close, but it's more it's not really a well, but it's clearly something that preservation was I'm going to bury your body here. And then it started to sprout in weird ways.
Yeah, it was the leak point or whatever.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Whereas I think it's cleverly intentional that the power is always referred to as being in the Well of Ascension, as opposed to the well being the power. Making that distinction a little bit, because I think it's not its sole function. And I think this is a big part of it.
Yeah.
The power of preservation resides within the Well of Ascension.
Right. Well, and the mists, it's divided between the two, and then also people. So,
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, to your point, right. It is sort of a center point.
Mm. And the Mistborn seeds, the nuggets, textually the nuggets.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
By our standards, the nuggies.
I'm just imagining a Stegosaurus dino nuggie, I know it's described as round, but I'm totally just sitting in that crown, or that disc, that clay disc there in the center. There's just a little dinosaur, and she plucked the little dinosaur out because she didn't know what it is. So she couldn't describe it as a dinosaur. It was just a little shape. She grabbed it and she put it in his mouth, and he chewed it, and he was a Mistborn. Mm-hmm. That's how it happened. Couldn't have happened any other way.
Yeah. But yeah, I think there's a relation there. I don't know what.
Cool. No, I mean, I like what you were kind of pointing to. It's one of those things where it's we'll see. I'm very excited to be reading further in this with you. I know we're both on complete blackouts as far as these Cosmere novels go, which also scares me for if they could spoil anything for any other books. And it's not like they've been released yet or anything, but there's an internal thing. And I think that Sanderson has said that everything except for the 4th book, you're good to go without reading anything else. He said even the 4th book, you're pretty good without reading anything else. The 4th book touches into Stormlight, apparently. So,
okay.
I don't know. My point is that I'm just the smingest, tingest, little tiny bit. Could it Could any of these touch on anything that, and there's no way to know. There's no way to know until we read it. And it's going to be fresh. It'll be fun. It'll be interesting. But it's a great example of like, there's still so many questions about some of these things that are kind of lingering out there. Pools are a great one. I do want to move to a different set of questions, then we'll come back to Ragnar's here. From one of the many people on Twitter of whom submitted questions. For PJ, what reveal struck you as the most surprising or unexpected? From Zypress. Thank you so much, Zypress, for sending in all these questions and being such a great listener, for sending us in stuff every week and interacting with us. We love you dearly. Thank you.
The most surprising or unexpected. God damn it. There's some good ones.
Mm-hmm.
I think the mother-sister tie-in to this whole thing is the biggest thing that caught me off guard. The fact that Vin's mother and sister were integral to this from the very beginning.
That was one that got me too. Like that, because it's one that's so early and you're just like, you learn about the trauma of like Reen and the daughter dying and the earring being this last gift. And you're just like, whoa. And you just log that in the back of your brain and you don't really think about it for a very long time. It's brought up a couple of times, but it is the most subtle of the kind of through threads. So,
right.
Yeah, I love that one. I think I would agree with you. I think I'd agree. I think that's probably that was one of the most surprising things to me was that reveal that's where the tin came from. Her tin ability came from, that enhanced her, was that hemalurgic spike plus the fact that it was from her sister who was a misting. It is kind of, it's a bit, it still has a lot of impact, but it is a little bit kind of, it's not given its time in the sun because it's made a big deal because of the logbook. I feel like that kind of doesn't highlight it quite enough, if that makes sense, as much as I would like.
Yeah,
exposition through the logbook in this book kind of undersells that, but I still think it's a big surprising reveal and it's still very good. But it was just like, I don't know, if there would have been some way for Vin to circle back on it, it would have been better as opposed to the logbook. And these are challenges that I see the third book having when it gets adapted. Like, I'm most concerned about this book being adapted because so much of it is obvious, so much of the plot is really well done and things like that, but a lot of the connecting threads are done through this logbook. And how the fuck do you do any of these logbooks in a TV show?
Narrator, I guess.
Yeah, but you know how much people like narrators? Almost not at all. Like, genuinely, there was a statistic, I think, that came out. Some people released it a couple of years ago. Someone took all of the movies that start with narration and have a persistent narrator over the movies. They performed on Rotten Tomatoes, on average, 30% less than peers in the same genre category, just because of the narration. And the director's cuts that removed the over the top narration and instead focused on the story did, on average, 20% better, which is just fucking absurd. We don't like to be narrated to when we're watching our shit, is kind of the answer there. Not that it can't be well done. There are examples of it being well done, but that was kind of the gist. Like Fight Club is the one that breaks the example. Yeah. But more often than not, the narration that you're getting is immediate on the scene. Like, it's immediate.
I guess I'm looking at it less about a narrator that is telling you the story overall. I'm looking at it more like the way that the Fellowship of the Ring opens with a narrator. So having a couple interjections like that.
That's okay. Yeah. I don't think that's what they were talking about. They were talking about like interspersing throughout the entire thing, like having narrator beats basically through a story.
I know. I agree. But doing it this way, like that sort of style of narration, as sort of interludes between parts, like at the beginning of every episode, even in a TV show, I think would be the way to do this logbook and impart information on the watcher, on the viewer, much like it's dropped on us here. Because so much of this story is reliant on understanding that logbook without it is intrinsically tied to this story.
Reliant, I think, is the most important part. This story is reliant upon the logbook, the logbooks even. But yeah, I'm the most concerned about that. I think everything else can make a lot of sense outside of maybe explaining the elementic metals themselves without going like POV. I'm a little bit concerned that that's like the easy way to wash it out, if that makes sense, to like go to an adaptation and be like, how do I explain the metal lines that are drawn out of her chest? Oh, I go POV and I see the metal lines and I see her pull. How does burning metals feel? Like there's a lot of like small things that need to be addressed. What's crazy is ferrochemy naturally fits adaptation. It's very easy comparatively. Allomancy is a lot tougher, as we I think mentioned an episode or two ago, where it's like you can't really read the rate at which someone is burning a metal in their stomach from what they're doing. You know, it just seems like superpower go, not if you're filming it. So
right.
There are concerns. I think they'll handle them. I'm not worried about it, but it is, if there were concerns, those are them. All right. A good one here from our friend Lindsay, of whom was our guest on the first episode, friend, patriot of the podcast a couple of different times in short pours, and doing great. It took the bar exam the other day. Not hopefully going to pass, but like I assume she did a great job. I'm confident in her capabilities, so I don't want to say it's like too late to say like good. Just send Lindsay good work, good job. It's hard. She has a great question for you, PJ. Yeah, good vibes to Lindsay always. She's also moving across the country, so at the same time, all of those props necessary. So Lindsay's question for you is: Dear PJ, which elementic ability best suits being ungodly tall, and which would be a pain in the ass? All of me says pewter for the first one.
Absolutely. Like straight up pewter for the first one. Yeah. No questions asked. My back sucks. Hit my back. Pewter would just fix that.
Yeah.
Which one would suck though? I don't know if there's any that would be a problem. Truly.
So, I think both iron and steel would be more problematic for you than most people because you're outsized versus what you're pulling against. And so like I think steel and iron work better when you're smaller because you have more flexibility of like range of motion and things like that.
If you're trying to
less
move,
flexibility.
If you're trying to fly with it, but I could move bigger things.
I guess my point is, in total, I think that it's worse. You could move bigger things. That's kind of not what I was... Yes, very true. You could move bigger things because you've got the counterweight. My point was more like the gangliness flying towards something is worse because you've got more accessible limbs to break off. I don't know.
That's true. I think the net is positive, though. Still. Like, none of it would be a pain in the ass, as it's asked. I think there are quirks, and I think I'd be less poised to fly.
So which is the quirkiest? Yeah, I guess that's your follow-up. Like, pain in the ass is like, what's the worst?
Tin.
Why?
Because
I need a why here.
I'll hear all the people far below me talking shit about the tall dude that they're looking up at.
Oh, boy. Okay. All right. Fine.
Cursed with hearing.
Cursed with the ability to hear people.
No, I think you're right. The steel and iron would be a lot more complicated in usage.
Cumbersome, at the very least. Yeah.
Because it's not from the hand, it's from the center of gravity. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't superhero Magneto hand to it. You gotta... Yeah.
Superhero Magneto gut to it.
Oh, man. There's a moment in Sandman, the show that is ripped directly from the comics, where he's like pulled into a cosmic vortex. And it's very much like pulled by the gut. And when you said that, I couldn't help but giggle and imagine the same thing, but towards a metal object being like, I'm going towards this candelabra. Gut first. So very, very silly images. Reminds me of Silly Walk. Cool. Going back, We have a Ragnar question here. Now that the Lord Ruler is out of the picture, how do you think technology will advance? For instance, will having something like guns make sense since there are coin shots who can make a coin to kill you just as well as a gun with a bullet? Make a coin kill you just as well. Sorry, Ragnar. A little bit. I've drank a little bit.
I think there will still be a use for guns, especially considering like not everyone's going to be a coin shot. You have to have defenses against coin shots and like an answer to them. Really, it'll be a source of inspiration and a source of innovation by trying to create technology that normal people can use that are inherent within mistings. So I think it'll rapidly accelerate the technology side of things by allowing people to innovate in such a way. That said, we didn't get an answer on this. Why the fuck are there railroad spikes on the front cover of Hero of Ages?
So those are just spikes. It's not necessarily that they're railroad spikes entirely, but they look that way.
They are so clearly railroad spikes.
I know. I'm just saying that I think that the answer that you're looking for is that spikes are spikes to a certain extent. They remind me as much of railroad spikes as they do like crucifixion spikes as classically depicted and forged. Square things are easier to forge than circle things.
Right.
Yeah.
True. But like these, I don't have my book with me right now. This is so obviously, it's bigger than a square nail. Like it's, I don't know. I'll leave it at that.
It is supposed to be a spike. Like it's so like each book depicts kind of like a central thing. The central thing of this book is hemalurgy for the most part. Like hemalurgy dominates this book as far as exposition goes because it's got more rules. So,
but also we know the spikes to be round.
The eye spikes are round, and the chest spike in Zane.
Yeah. And those are the only ones that are depicted in shape.
Really, yeah, given shape. I really think it's more in choice than anything else. I don't think it's anything crazy. So,
fair enough.
Yeah,
I was just hoping for like Elend found that he couldn't quite use the horseshoes, but railroad like these railroad spikes had better purchase. It was easier to use to fly like that.
Man, it would have been so cool if we would have gotten a lot of like Elend character development over the course of this book. Would have been so neat.
Mm-hmm.
I would have,
it's pretty true.
Like that. Yeah. I would have enjoyed that.
All right.
Would have been cool. Gripe. Speaking of, I want to move to a different question. We'll kind of flip back and forth here until we get to the end. From Zyprus again. Which character had the best character art throughout the series, in your opinion? Who's your favorite?
Sazed. Hands down, Sazed. I think, honestly, Spook is second.
Okay.
If we're looking just start to finish, Elend, but we get so little of it. And Vin's is up there, but ultimately, like, it plateaus so early.
Very true. Yeah.
So, those are my top four.
I personally, like, really appreciate Kelsier's character development because he dies and then degrades, actually, over the course of the rest of the story. In a genuine way, I think that's actually really important to recognize from a character perspective is that Kelsier is less useful to them outside of being a bad example of what to do more often than not. Like he's an inspiration in some ways, but in a lot of ways, he's not. But
he's also the motivation for their entire army.
Yes,
they don't have an army without him.
Yeah, and that's silly. A little bit. Like, are you saying in Mistborn they don't have an army without him?
No. I'm saying like a lot of their army in Hero of Ages is like centered around the idea of the Church of the Survivor. It's not entirely
right,
but
that's kind of a false. You know, it's kind of a
there'd be a void. That void would be filled by something.
Right. Yeah. I'm also not even trying to point in that direction. It's kind of like a false religion to begin with, right? And the entire idea of it, like people
that doesn't
can place
matter.
faith
That's
in anything.
Kelsier, though.
Right.
That's Kelsier's influence. It doesn't matter if it's false.
I just, at my very core, yeah, you're right. You're right. It doesn't matter. Personally, at my very core, it matters that it's false. Like, it matters that it's wrong. And you're not wrong.
We don't know that for sure, though. Because we have this ambiguous ending that references Sazed talking to Kelsier and interacting with him in this cosmic plane, saying that this was a request from Kelsier to give Spook Mistborn abilities. It's ambiguously left, but its potential is that Kelsier is alive cosmically and influencing the world.
Do the people really have evidence of that, though?
Does that matter?
I think it does, especially when so much
nothing
of the
matters as far as religion goes.
Well, what I'm saying is that so many of these religions rely and says impressions of religions matter based on factual realities. So like that's the part that's tough to parse, right? Like I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to just posit this and say that like they're all wrong, because from a meta perspective, it's okay. We know that they're wrong. Like we don't need to think any further on it. We know that the Hero of Ages is correct. We know the Terrace faith was the correct faith. We like have answers that we can like stare at and look at. But the reason that I get into the Kelsier thing here is because I do think that the hero worship that is given over to Kelsier, he's meant to not be, especially in the way that Well of Ascension paints him, he is not meant to be the idol just because he held power, just because he was just because he was a Mistborn. We're going to respect him and what he was doing. He was doing the right thing for once. Like that's what we're going to hold up. And that's okay that in the end, people took that and ran it and turned it into something bigger. They turned it into something that was bigger than what Kelsier was. But my point kind of at the core is that like Kelsier wasn't innate, like as Vin knew him, that wasn't what Kelsier was aiming for.
True.
That wasn't Kelsier's. Kelsier as a person is worse than he is as a martyr. He's great as a martyr. He's fine as a person.
I'm with you, but I think it's unfair to divorce those from each other. And it's all still his influence. Regardless of if it's true to his character as a living being, it's still his influence. And it's still his story arc. He bumblefucked his way into it, but it doesn't mean that it's not there.
That's fair. We do have... There are lingering questions about Kelsier in general here on the outset, and it seems as though, there's questions about the afterlife, period, So we'll see what that amounts to in the future, maybe.
Sounds good.
If it's there, if it's really Kelsier, if it was a wish that Sazed logged from Kelsier from interactions. So
that's my gut instinct, is that it was some conversation that he had with Kelsier before he died, talking about Spook, and this was his wish, his request.
Yeah,
request makes it a little bit harder to make ambiguous, though.
Sure.
So anyway,
that language does kind of specify it a little bit more. Yeah. Okay, going back here to Ragnar, do you think Kelsier would have been able to get a foothold on Marsh's consciousness at all, should they square off? Or do you think he was completely lost with Ruin in control? Do you think Kelsier could have had an impact on what was going on with Marsh?
Like if Kelsier was alive?
Yeah.
At the end?
Yes.
Maybe to an extent a little bit farther than what Vin was able to do, but we saw the progression of Ruin's control. And there was this little tiny sliver of Marsh that was able to peek through. And that's so heavily determined by emotion, my understanding at least. So interacting with Kelsier, I feel like that emotion would be even stronger, because the emotion about Vin was regarding Kelsier, seeing her as a daughter, essentially, and like the interactions that they had, it was all based on Kelsier's like influence on Vin.
Yeah.
So Kelsier being there, that emotion would have been heightened a little bit more. So Marsh's control would have been a little bit stronger over himself.
Okay.
But I don't think it would have been that much. It'd be like 2% to like 2.5%. If we like that sort of scale.
Yeah, I understand. I don't know. I don't think so. I can understand your scale proposition. I think that he was just so severely limited, and I think the idea that he had lost all these people actually fueled him more to fight for Vin. So I think if Kelsier would have lived, it would have been a little bit of the opposite, because he would have believed that there would have been other tools to get them to where they need to be. I feel like Marsh's act is out of desperation because it's the last thing that he can do to. So I feel like as opposed to 2.5, I would go down to like 1.75 because he'd believe in his brother.
I guess I'm operating under the assumption that the entire story is the same, and then Kelsier just shows up right at the end. Everybody but Kelsier surviving and everybody knowing it, that changes the prospects of the entire story, and that's hard to. It
does, yeah. It's hard parse. To what if that into the entire thing. Yeah, right. To the idea that Kelsier is still alive at this point is very difficult to parse.
Right.
So yeah, and it would be like a little bit unfair to a lot of the character arcs and things like that. Like it would undermine some stuff
entirely.
Yeah. It would be really kind of cheap. So, with that, we have one more question from Ragnar here. Do you think the Lord Ruler could have defeated Ruin if Kelsier hadn't intervened? If the Lord Ruler would have had time to wait for the well to completely replenish itself, do you think that would have happened?
No.
This is kind of the would Kelsier fucked it up? Like, did Kelsier fuck it up question?
No, I think the entire point was to continue keeping him at bay. Keeping him trapped.
Do you think the Lord Ruler wouldn't have picked up the power and like tried to go after Ruin?
No, I think he would have picked up the power and fixed some of his mistakes from before. I think he would have made the planet a little bit more inhabitable.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's what he would have focused on. He would have kept Ruin at bay because inherently, I don't think it's possible to just destroy Ruin by picking up the power. That was kind of the whole point.
Yeah, he would have had to pick up, as we understand it, our assumption is that he would have had to actually hold the power of preservation, not just the well power, but the full breadth of power that was available to Vin, that the previous holder of preservation had left when they died, would have had to hold that and then self-annihilate, as Vin did.
But he'd have to let Ruin out in order to self-annihilate against him. To push against Ruin. And they have to be at equal footing. I think that you can only annihilate yourself with a Ruin if you're both at the same strength.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just trying to think if there's so many complicated thoughts that I can't explain yet. Same. But I don't think the Lord Ruler could have annihilated Ruin with the power at the well alone, because a lot of the power of the well itself was in containing Ruin. So that's, I think, to me, the most important metric of that is that giving up the power means that you're also not reinforcing the power of the well. So, yeah. Which
I think it's a lot more complicated than killing Ruin. I think this has a lot more to it than that.
Right. I guess like if we're trying to quantify the argument, I would say that like picking up the well's power is equivalent to 40% of the total power. Ruin entrapped has 50% of his power, being that preservation gave 10% to humanity. So that means the mists are worth 50%. You've got 10% in humanity, and you've got 40% over here in the well. The 40% can never annihilate the 50% of Ruin. So you're trapped in the cycle of just keeping him entrapped, because about 10% of Ruin still leaks through to influence the world, and like he's got tendrils and things. So
yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be the way the equation works in my brain.
That makes sense. And then 50% is in ATM.
Right, exactly. Yeah, 50% in ATM, 50% in the mists, and then 10% in humanity gives you that kind of dichotomous split between the groups.
And that gives a 50-50 split between Ruin after she dies, like after she goes out of her human form.
Right.
And Ruin, like, that equation works pretty well.
That's my thought. Or at the very least, like, she can force herself against. She doesn't take all of the preservation from humanity, but she's just got the littlest nudge above 50%, and so she can annihilate.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah. So, all told, no. I think the answer here to the Lord Ruler being able to intervene is no. Yeah. It would have been continuing the cycle, more or less, but improving things. I think the Lord Ruler would have tried to improve things for people. That would have been his goal. Make it more, make humanity better, you know? Kind of try to stretch those things. Okay. From Zyprus, you want to read this one?
One for Cross. Out of all of PJ's predictions, which one was the one that you were most surprised that I got right?
That's tough, because there were a couple that like genuinely shocked me and put me on my ass in the moment, because we're on camera again. We've been doing this entire series on camera versus we previously didn't. And so there were a couple of different times that I was just absolutely shocked at your predictions. I think some of the biggest ones came from some of the positing. I think specifically it was around, you guessed a lot of things that were going to happen in Hero early in Well, but you were like just a degree or two off. And like all of me was like, you're just so fucking close on all of this stuff. And you were just like missing one little minutia that would have pushed you over the edge.
Hemalurgy.
Well, yeah, hemalurgy in general.
I think would have helped a lot of that. I feel like I was a lot more off the mark in this series than I was in Red Rising. That's a tough thing to compare, just from like a series to series perspective, because Red Rising leans more on character development to lead plot, right? And so you can kind of mentally project where a character is going to go, as opposed to here is a new science that you have to work out. Can you work out the new science on your own? No, you can't. You need details to like figure out and piece things out. Like you need details, and then once you get the details, you can start to piece things together. So I think that's the tough part that I have comparing, is that it's just they're strictly different styles of approaching writing, and so the predictions are different. Like your predictability in something is very different. To not put too fine of a point on it, do you have an answer?
Character in book 5, after in the middle of the book, shows up. Like, you couldn't have necessarily predicted that, right? Like, right. But the character growth of like watching all the other characters go along are more predictable. I have a tough time comparing the two in that way, and even in the way that we write predictions for them is different, or the way that we wrote or structured them.
Yep.
So yeah,
I wanted to make sure that there wasn't a stark, like, I wanted to make sure there was a stark like cut point.
Yes. Remove this. So I guess the core point being, I was most shocked at some of the things that PJ guessed about, I think, Orsur, actually. I think you were very on to Orsur Tensoon without knowing that you were on, if that makes sense, especially in the Well of Ascension. I think that you were more keen on something being wrong and it not being inside of the party earlier. And you were... At the very beginning, you leaned heavily on the idea that could a Khandra imitate a Khandra? And that was the one that I just like cold stone face, and I was like, has anyone said that? Have they said that before? Like, could that be a thing? That hasn't been defined. And you were like, no. And I was like, no, it hasn't. I just had to like try to roll forward. I think that's the one that got me. I think that's one of the ones that stuck with me.
My friend Stephanie.
Some of the Well stuff got me too, but
my friend Stephanie, when she was reading it, she was texting me like while she was reading, and her first comment about Well of Ascension that she sent me was like, I think Orsur is the mole, essentially. I can't remember the exact wording she used, but I'm like, I'm not going to respond to this. I'm just going to let her continue to send messages, and then I'll respond to some of them selectively. Because I don't have the tact that you do.
It's tough, gained. Man. It gets hard. The most fun incorrect prediction though was about Zane being Reen. That was my favorite one to lean in with for you. Was like
the weirdest thing.
Could it work?
If you really boil it down, it's kind of true.
Wait, what? No, they're
because
not.
Because Zane is so heavily influenced and is essentially Ruin.
Yeah.
And so is Reen.
So of the reread moments, I think one of the things that I appreciate the most on reread is how much Zane is fighting against the influence of Ruin. That's not apparent on the front end. It's not apparent when you're reading it. You read him as emo sad boy, which, we talked with Foxy Reader for a long time. And it's like in rereads, you're like, oh, he is not only a broken person, but he is also being directly pounded down consistently by this force that is telling him to kill other people. And this super magical force is kind of pushing on his emotions constantly. Like, oh God.
It makes it make sense. It
humanizes
that
him it makes him
for sure
one of the most complex characters in the series.
The fact that he's constantly telling Straff that he's going to kill him and then is still trying to do it. That seems like such at odds with each other, and it is, but it's essentially Reen peeking out, or not Reen, fucking Zane peeking out and like trying to warn his father that Ruin's trying to get him to kill him.
Yeah.
It makes it make so much more sense, and it's so much more heartbreaking.
Yeah.
He's
Zane
less crazy, he's less inconsistent, he's more consistent understanding that.
Yeah. He's still broken fundamentally as a person, no doubt, and dysregulated. And there are definitely issues. However, he is not nearly as like textually awful as the text gives him in the first pass, which is something that I was having. I'm glad that you latched into like what I was trying to say at the time with like kind of the deep trauma and things like that. Because I was very afraid that you're going to be like, no, he doesn't have any issues. And I'm like, no, he's so deeply flawed. And like, he can't fucking help a lot of this stuff. And yeah, you definitely agreed with me on the God side of things, which I was just so glad that you latched into that idea. And it worked out, I think, in the long run for payoff for him. Yeah. So
I think, do we have one more?
We have two more. So we have Marcus here.
Okay.
Take this one off. You can read this one. Actually, I'll read it to you. I know what they are. So I'm not going to, reading it off to me doesn't make any sense. So from Marcus, of whom is a patron, sent it into us on Twitter. We love you, Marcus. Thank you so much for following the show and giving us the time of day and the time to listen to us. Marcus asks, what do you think the missing metals are? And do you think they'll show up in Era 2 books? I would also add, what powers could be out there?
So we're missing 2 or we're missing 4?
Yes, we're missing 4.
We're missing 4.
But one
is the nugget that grants Mistborn ship. I think the inverse of that removes allomantic ability entirely. So you've got the nuggies and the anti-nuggies. Let's see. So let's look at the...
Hold, please. Do you have your book?
Yeah.
Go to the Ars Arcanum. So we're missing 2. Yeah. Replacing ATM and mal-ATM, right?
Yeah. Oh, I feel like there's a lot in here that I shouldn't know.
No, PJ, you're welcome to fucking read them. I did tell you that at the end of each book.
No, but... This isn't answered textually.
This is text.
I disagree. I feel like I'm being like...
This is in-world text.
In-world... okay.
Truly, it's in-world text written by a person. Just like it was at the end of Elantris.
Interesting. Okay. Then I'm more okay with it.
It's the same person.
Okay. So ATM and mal-ATM are... outside of, so let's see, got iron and steel, tin and pewter. So what are the ones that we're missing? Like, where do they live on the circle?
So it would be replacing mal-ATM and ATM.
I know. I'm trying to look at the signals.
Bottom right, top of the bottom right, if I remember correctly. So I was just looking at it. I'm just pulling these out to remove the little sticky marks for chapters.
So it's the outside of the bottom right quadrant.
Yes, that sounds right.
So that is in conjunction with Electrum and Gold, which are see your own past and see your own future. See someone else's past and see someone else's future, I guess would be the one that would fit there. But
so your assumption is what? One more time for the tape.
See someone else's past and see someone else's future.
Okay. Doesn't gold already show you someone else's past?
No, it shows you your own.
What? Oh, Mal ATM shows. Yeah. Okay. So you're assuming that they basically fit in right on top of ATM and Mal ATM?
Yep.
Do you think that's likely?
Yep.
Y'all should. I wish you could see the face that PJ was making, because I don't think PJ is so convinced by his own prediction. He just doesn't have a better one to levy.
I don't. I want to go off the deep end, but I can't.
You can, absolutely.
I would need some time to really study this and put together an answer.
It's fair.
Because I think I could figure it out. From cross-referencing things.
I did tell you that you could read these after, not before we were done with them, but you could read them after.
Even reading them now, it feels like cheating.
It kind of is, yeah. It kind of feels like cheating, yes. It is exposition without anything attached to it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I understand. I understand your feeling and your... Because it's not... those were, up until the moment that you flip it open, those were blanks, and you didn't know. Now you flipped it open, now it's like, oh, you know. So,
yep.
But it's textual, so that's the other tough part. It's like, what do you take as text? What do you ignore? Recently, I got an advanced reader copy of a book that had, in the front of the book, it had a cast list, and it was clearly a joke cast list, which is hysterical to me. It was a bunch of little dogs, and it described these dogs. And the dogs have nothing to do with the story, very clearly. But they were all of these different people's dogs that they brought to the park, and it was described in the cast list. It's like, this person's dog, it has a red nose. And it was just very silly. And I lost it. Really very, very, very funny, very clever. Okay, we've got one final question left here. And I think it's a good, unless, of course, you have any, we can always end with one of those, or whatever else.
No.
So from Ziva, patron, Instagram follower, the wind punner, as it were, what is your favorite relationship dynamic of the series, and why?
I think it's Spook.
Are you gonna take mine?
And Vin.
Okay, all right. They're gonna take mine.
I mean, I could go off in several different directions with Spook, and maybe it's more apt to say Spook and Kelsier, but Spook and Vin sparks this unquenchable thirst for relevance within Spook that drives him to become the person that he is, and it's heartbreaking and mostly negative. It works out in the end for us. But for the most part, he feels terrible about his inadequacy throughout this entire story. And I wouldn't say primarily, but in a very significant way, it's driven by his rejection by Vin early on in that first book.
I think that's great. I think that's a great one to pick out. I think that is a guiding thing for Spook throughout every other moment, and I think that follows a great arc for him, especially as it culminates into the end. I love when he shows back up and he becomes an important question when they're fleeing Luthadel in the Well of Ascension, because that's when it kind of that insecurity flexes again. It's even more prevalent in the Hero of Ages when he gets his time to shine. So I love that. I think it's a great answer.
What's yours?
I think my first pick, is, especially in all these rereads, I've grown to really appreciate Clubs and Spook's relationship. That's mine. I think that there is truly a lot of deep caring there, and obvious, we only get there. It's so limited. It's so stringent. I'm tying knots together with us here to get us to this point, right? There's so little to tie the structure together, but from the beginning, when he like advocates for Spook to be a part because he's around and he's also a Tin Eye, and then he fights for him continually, and then Spook being so distraught over the loss of Clubs and Well of Ascension, and then getting the flashback when Spook is under all that pressure and feeling like he's dying in the Hero of Ages to his memory of Clubs and saving him. I think those are some of the most impactful moments for me from a relationship perspective, because it is in a big way, Clubs is not his father or his dad, but he is, I think, the best father figure that Spook ever had. And I think the book maybe wants to point towards Kelsier being that for Spook, and I firmly disagree with that tendency to lean that direction. I think Spook should have spent a lot more internal time idolizing Clubs and like looking to Clubs for advice, and like the voice in his head should have been Clubs. We can understand why it was Kelsier. Kelsier is the emotional manipulation aspect, and that makes sense because he's, his own godhood figure or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think it would have been more impactful to see Clubs be that idol in the back of Spook's head.
I agree.
Because he's the one who actually stands up for him in the beginning. He's the one who saves his life at the beginning of his life. And Kelsier also stands up for him. I don't want to underplay that. Kelsier is a close second place on that timeline of supporting Spook. Not a close second place in relationships for me, but yeah. Mm-hmm. For me, it's Clubs and Spook. If I had to try to pick anything else, Sazed and Tindwyl, just in general, it's tough to not pick that.
Yeah.
Because it's emotionally devastating, and the entire thing drags throughout the Hero of Ages, and that's like our reins to go through the story in a big way. All right, that brings us to the end of the questions. PJ, do you have anything else that you want to talk about? Anything else you want to mention? Anything else that's on your brain, the series?
I've just been having a joy of a time going through this and puzzling things out and really like digging into this magic system that so effectively reveals itself through this story. So I appreciate you for introducing it to me. I hope people have enjoyed my naive musings throughout the whole time. And I'm excited to talk to some real Brandon Sanderson scholars in a couple days.
Yeah. I'm also very excited. We are going to be having on a couple of folks from Spanreads, the show on Shardcast that's been doing a recover of the Mistborn series leading up to the new release of The Lost Metal, which is also what we're reading up to. So it timed out perfectly that we'd have them at the end of Era 1. So we're going to chat with a couple of the people over there. Depends on scheduling. We've got like a group of people, as many as can make it is kind of the game plan. So yeah, very, very exciting and stoked for that episode. You can check it out next week. So that'll be a full Era 1 wrap up. We touched on a lot of things from the full era here. I mean, we did wrap up the book. We wrapped up the predictions. So I feel good. I am very excited to go into Era 2. How do you feel about going into Era 2? I
have no idea what to think, man.
Okay.
Like, I recognize based on the name that it's going to be maybe a time jump.
Sure.
I don't know how long of one. I don't know what's going to change.
Yeah.
I'm assuming we won't know any characters other than maybe Sazed if we get to interact with him. So I'm expecting more extrapolation on an already really well-defined magic system and an entirely new cast of characters with new stories and new problems and new journeys. So that's my expectation.
I think that's great. I don't want to paint anything else on top of that picture. I'm so excited to go into these books. I've already very recently reread the first one in the series to set up for note-taking and whatnot, and I am so stoked to talk about this. And that coverage will begin on the week of the 15th. So very excited for all of that to come out. Beyond that, that's where we're going to leave you for this week.
Thank you, as ever, to Tim and Andrew for keeping our show's lights on. You can find our show notes. You can check out our show notes, which have links to our schedule, our Patreon, our previous episodes, our websites, our social media accounts, all in one very convenient location.
All that said, I do want to thank one of our existing bartenders for upgrading to the other bartender tier. Donna, you moved up from an early adopter tier to the other one to support us more, and I love that. I really appreciate that endlessly. It's $1, but it's Patreon takes a lot less and we make a little bit more, and every little bit counts to keeping our little show afloat. So we really appreciate that. And if you haven't already joined the Patreon, you should, so that you can hang out with all these cool people that asked us all these cool questions this week. We did have some from, of course, Twitter and Instagram and whatnot, but come on, the water's fine.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't realize that was something that happened. So thank you very much.
Yeah. I mean, I got the email alert and I was like, oh, thanks. That's so nice. So we really appreciate that for sure. Beyond that, you can find us, as PJ had mentioned, Words Whiskey Pod on Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, wordsandwhiskeyshow@gmail.com, patreon.com/words and whiskey, t-shirts on TeePublic. Follow the link, as PJ had mentioned. We've got a number of things going on. I'm going to be at Dragonsteel.
Me, maybe.
Which will be fun. PJ, maybe.
I have a ticket.
PJ's a ticket.
The problem is it's a Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, the question is do we go like a Thursday?
Well, the question is, can
Friday
I get that off work?
That's your own problem. I'm going to be at Dragonsteel, folks. PJ's going to try to figure it out.
We're going to try.
It's going to be very exciting. Regardless, follow us there. We thank you all for all your support, for listening to us throughout this entire era of books. This was something new for us. This was our first series transition. So we're all very thankful for all of those of you who listened to the show over the course of the last couple of months as we moved from Red Rising and whatnot, and all of the new ones of whom joined to listen to us cover the Cosmere. So with that, we'll see you next week for an episode with Shardcast, and the weeks following, we'll see you in Era 2.
See you then.
Ta-ta.